It's the 10th day of November 2022. A very good morning to you, and I hope you had a good night's sleep. Welcome on board to Morning Cafe with me, Stanley Yeringit, as we kickstart your day the best way we know how. So recently, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, approved 52.7 billion Kenyan shillings loan to facilitate the country's economy plan. The utilization and disbursement of this loan to the various state departments will be a litmus test to the 58-day-old Kenya Kwanza government. This, even as its captain, President William Ruto, is pushing to cut on bordering. This morning, we'll be diving into matters Kenya's economy with the sharpest of minds. Former nominated Senator Isaac Mwaura, who is also in the Budget Appropriations Committee, the Senate, and also Engineer Wathimba Crispus, an economic analyst, and Dr. Frederick Ogola, an economic expert basically, and also a lecturer at the Strathmore University. You can always chime in the conversation on our socials, which are below your screens right now. But first, let's take a look at the dailies, and we'll begin with Daily Nation. And we'll go to the Standard, and I'll be taking you through also the People Daily before we get into what is happening in the country. So the Daily Nation right now, the whole big headline there is "Freedom has come." And accused of fraud, arrested in a 7.4 billion Kenyan shillings investigation. In his words, quote-unquote, intimidated and harassed by the Uhuru government and hauled to court several times to explain the source of his billions. Rigathi Gachagua is living the freedom, quote-unquote, promise of the Kenya Kwanza era, as the Director of Public Prosecutions formally writes to the courts, asking to withdraw the charges against the Deputy President. 3 months into office, this son of a Mau Mau peasant, quote-unquote again, could be completely off the hook by this afternoon should the courts grant him and Noordin Haji their prayers. This story is extensive on page 4 and 5. But before you go to that, and on the left side of the Daily Nation this beautiful morning is picked for jobs, for top jobs. That is Ezra Chiloba, who is the Communication Authority Director General, James Muhati, Permanent Secretary Nominee, Economic Planning, Immaculate Kasait, Data Commissioner, Consolata Nkatha, Deputy Head of Mission in Rome, Italy, Dr. Paul Kurgat, Deputy Head of Mission in Moscow, Russia, Margaret Mochanya, Deputy Head of Mission in Islamabad, Pakistan, and Nderito, Registrar of Political Parties, Praxides Torore, Board Member, IPOA. And definitely one thing that all of those names have in common is that at one particular time they served in the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So right there, the nation has it. Are they being rewarded? And after, is it a whole payback for the former poll officials who have landed top positions? Still on the front page of the Daily Nation matters football. So I think it's 10 days now to the 2022 Qatar World Cup. Have you chosen your team yet? I'm curious to know that. So the FIFA World Cup, a history, the planet's biggest sporting event. So we do have there a whole special book, serialization and all that. And now to the second page of the Daily Nation matters Conference of Parties, which is ongoing in Sharm el-Sheikh, that is in Egypt, right here in Africa. So initiatives aims to expand Africa's voluntary carbon markets. That is on page 2 of the Daily Nation. So Kenya is set to reap from a new carbon market initiative. Climate change. President Ruto has indicated that the country is keen to exploit the carbon credits. That's the whole Conference of Parties, the whole COP27 coverage is on page 2 and page 3. So quite an interesting story on page 3. Praying for rain. May God make it happen. That is on Nkongu Narok Primary School. Tough times that we are living in. Suffering humans and animals around Amboseli have been ravaged by drought. Let's cross over to page 4 on other matters, and that is actually the whole matters, the corridors of justice, and the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua might be ripping up from the whole freedom has come as chanted by the Kenya Kwanza. So off the hook, investigator says he acted on orders of the Directorate of Criminal Investigations boss, George Kinoti. This investigator, the lead investigator, Kurio Badia. So prosecutor claims police failed to supply her office with multiple documents like letters of awards and minutes of committees. So inside there, it says the raid arrested on Friday, detained in Muthaiga. So 23rd, that is the date in July 2021, that the Directorate of Criminal Investigations officers raided the home of Mathira MP Rigathi Gachagua in the wee hours of the morning and drove him to Nairobi, triggering protest. He was the then Mathira Member of Parliament, now the Deputy President. And now to page 5. That story is extensive on page 4 and a bit on page 5. And still on page 5, the nominations of the ELA, the Lucrative. We were talking about this yesterday, by the way, with the legislators, and it was a whole conversation of this, positions slotted and put aside to reward loyalists and family members, basically. It's a whole big question on that. So Moi pulls out of ELA race. So close relatives of ODM leader Raila Odinga and Wiper's Kalonzo Musyoka make it to the final list. So we'll be taking a look at that, and the whole elections will be conducted on the 17th, that is on next week, I believe on Wednesday, before they get to represent Kenya in Arusha, that is in Tanzania. Let's cross over to real quick now to something that will, form the whole meat of our conversation this morning. On page 6, Kenya differs 85 billion Kenyan shillings loan repayments on cash grant. So debt burden, IMF tells new government to continue with measures to grow revenue and controlling spending. That will form our conversation this particular morning. Matters the economy and all that. Unbudgeted spending, much of it for fuel subsidies, posed an additional challenge. Then on page 8, we're talking about the whole payback. Former poll officials land top jobs. I've read out the names. You can take a look at them right there on page 7 of your Daily Nation. Real quick to page 8, a whole unfolding of one story that has been the headlines and top stories even in recent and in past weeks. So Kenya, Pakistan differ on Sharif's death. So there is the killing probe. A minister in Islamabad calls the killing quote-unquote murder, but adds that investigations are ongoing. So real quick, let me take a look at the letter that is inside there. The family dismisses police statement. So in a statement dismissed as inconsistently by Sharif's family, the NPS say the journalist was killed by officers pursuing a vehicle that had been reported stolen from Gara, Nairobi. Sharif's mother, Rifat Alvi, and other family members accused Kenya of changing statements on how the killing occurred. Kenyan police changed that stance and statements 3 to 4 times, even before the investigation team had left for Kenya. Federal ministers started airing fabricated stories, the letter said. And away from that, let's cross over to, on page 10, we'll be taking a look at that also matters our economy, that is the whole bloated costs and other shady moves behind the standard gauge railway deal secrecy. This even as we wait for the whole ruling by the Apex Court on all these matters. And now, real quick to the back page of the Daily Nation matters, the Kenya and South Africa bilateral ties. Before we get matters spotty, South Africa removes visa requirement for Kenyans, basically. So Kenyans won't need to apply for visa before traveling to South Africa for business or tourism, right? And as much as they haven't added it there, I'll add it myself. You can always, use this particular opportunity to just travel there and feel where Amapiano comes from, basically. Use this opportunity, by the way, to get to know all that. So basically, this is a whole, which happened yesterday, where the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, visited Kenya to just, bold in this particular ties of Kenya and South Africa. Now to matters sports on page 39, 2022 FIFA World Cup. Real quick, 10 days to the FIFA World Cup. Quite waiting for all this. And even as Sadio Mane, who won't be in for the Senegalese national team. Quite sad, but we'll definitely be taking a look at how this will be unfolding, the 2022 World Cup. So it gives you a whole scenario of back then in the days, what used to happen, and the different teams right there. Let's cross over to the Standard, the bold newspaper. So on the Standard this morning, we have the big headline there, big names for ELA slots right there. So headache after failing to get key positions in government. President William Ruto's allies and Raila Odinga's cronies are staking out for slots in the regional parliament, but with only 9 seats to share, who will have the last laugh? That we'll be knowing it next week on the 17th of November. So it gives you the whole, the faces of those who are in that list real quick. Kennedy Kalonzo, who is Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, that is Wiper Party leader, and that is Wiper Party leader's son, Winnie Odinga. There's a daughter to Azimio leader Raila Odinga's daughter, Suleiman Shahbal, Timothy Bosire, Hassan Omar, Kanini Kega, Jeremiah Kioni, both of them are in the Jubilee Party, and Fatuma Gedi, David Sankok, Justice Kizira, just to mention but a few. And yeah, that we have it, the whole ELA slots and the lucrative the whole push and pull. It is going to be a headache for both Ruto and Odinga. Below that, National Freedom knocks for Gachagua as DPP withdraws case. The story is extensive on page 8. And 90-day visa deal for Kenyans. And then at the top of it, House approves Kenyan forces to enter DR Congo. And matters international, control of U.S. Congress in the balance, matters sports, strict rules for Qatar World Cup. This is going to be one World Cup that is going to be quite different from others. It's going to be in the history books, basically. So real quick on matters, page 5. Something that we haven't yet looked at on page 5 of the Standard this morning. Parliament approves Koome as the new Inspector General of Police. Koome met all the requirements and will succeed Hilary Mutyambai. Mutyambai proceeded on leave citing medical reasons on August 26th. This is one story that we looked at it yesterday with the legislators. And just to look at, we looked at, the intro that is awaiting the new IG, Japheth Koome, and what he is, his first day is what he should really be looking at. On page 6, Ruto launches diplomatic charm offensive as he cements leadership. So this story, extensive on page 6, just takes a look at from his first gaffe as president, his first days, what he maybe, made a mistake, and then what and how he's actually trying to recognize all that and correct it, basically. So it learns how his first days in office have been in matters bilateral relations. The president started on a wrong note after Western Sahara gaffe on his first day. Barely 2 months in office, he has met several heads of state and top diplomats so far. So 58 days so far. How are these bilateral relations shaping up, and how important are they, right? And away from that now to matters page 8, before we take a look at the People Daily also. Haji seeks to withdraw 7.5 billion Kenyan shillings graft charges against Gachagua. Right, so it gives you the timeline of Gachagua, that is the deputy president's case. So from the October 23rd, 2020, all the way to November 9th, 2022, which is yesterday. You can take a look at that on your Standard. Now, real quick to the People Daily. Let's start with the front page, which is on your screen right now. So big names miss out on ELA jobs. And the first name there is Gideon Moi, who is the Kano National Chairman, dropped out yesterday. And Elizabeth Ngoro, who is a former Kasarani Member of Parliament, left out by Azimio One Kenya. Amos Wako, former senator, had expressed interest in regional seat. And Asman Kamama, former Tianti MP, will also not be going out to Arusha next month. We have Moses Olesakuda, who was on original list of applicants, but his name was dropped. Simon Mbugua, former ELM Member of Parliament, misses out again after losing in Starehe. Call it double luck, double misluck, maybe, right? Naomi Shaban had applied, but her name was also left out of final 16 names. Next alert, Kanu Secretary General had set eyes on seat but was left out. Also on the People Daily, Regional Assembly, that is, even as bigwigs fall by wayside, Raila's daughter and Kalonzo's son have made it to the shortlist of the 16. It is up to the MPs to elect the final 9, which, again, I had told you will happen on the 17th of November. At the top of the People Daily, matters bilateral time that I've looked at just now, free visas to Kenyans visiting SA from 2023. Right. And I had told you, make sure that you use this particular opportunity not to miss out. Now, let's take a look at what's deep into matters the People Daily. On page 2, it is the whole corridors of justice and freedom has come for the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua. As GOtv first out to charge Gachagua, top officer says. Recognize matters health, that is on page 3 of your People Daily. And of that, 1.7 billion Kenyan shillings COVID-19 vaccines unaccounted for. Audit reveals this is going to be one in tray for the new Cabinet Secretary of Health, Susan Nahomicha Wafula, just to try and figure out where all this went and to have a follow-up on all these particular matters. And yeah, so we have ministry blames rising cholera cases on water shortages and drought. You can take a look at all that even as you buy all these particular dailies. Now let's take a look at what is happening in matters Kenya and even abroad. So in a bid to realize President Ruto's plan to annually deliver 200,000 affordable housing units, Buxton Point, a housing project in partnership with the county government of Mombasa, has exerted the mandate as they look forward to realizing a new face of Mombasa County. Ruto's administration, through the new Cabinet Secretary for Lands, Housing and Urban Development, Zakaria Mwangi Njeru, has welcomed partnerships between devolved governments and private developers to inject funds into the affordable housing projects to ensure no Kenyan lives in deplorable conditions.
Tumeweza kufanya kazi vizuri sana na Mombasa County Government na Kenya Power and Lighting na Kunha na Kera, kuweza kuangalia vipi tutaweza kufanya mambo ya kuweza kuifanya hii estate iwe functional. Okay, so tunawashukuru, lakini na pia sasa tunataka wao pia wajitahidi zaidi kuweza kutusaidia. Okay, pia tuko katika front line ya kuhakikisha kwamba tumeweka sewer system nearby Buxton, not only to serve Buxton but to serve even the environs of Buxton.
Mradi huu umenisaidia kwa maisha yangu, nashukuru, na kuja hapa na rauka nafanya kazi yangu. Mimi niko department ya safety. Kusema kweli nashukuru, kwenye maisha yangu yameimprove kidogo, niko sawa kimaisha sasa.
When you have a project like this, there is development of infrastructure. Sewage inaimproviwa, barabara zinatengenezwa vizuri, because this project demands that you have such upgrade in Mombasa and the environs.
And from that, Cabinet Secretary for Public Service and Gender, Aisha Juma, wants her murder case dropped in another court battle. The Kenjokoma brothers' murder case has been adjourned to February 27th next year. Collins Lusweti with a roundup of those stories produced by Ronnie Regan.
Cabinet Secretary for Public Service and Gender, Aisha Juma, is now calling on the Director of Public Prosecution to drop her murder case pending at the Mombasa law courts. Through her lawyers Dunstan Omari and Omayo Aranga, the former Malindi MP says there is no evidence linking her to the murder, arguing that the close perusal of the ballistic report indicated that the bullet that was used to kill the deceased did not emanate from the CA's firearm.
Representing Aisha Juma and quite a number of people were charged. After being given the witness statements, we evaluated the witness statements that we have of the complainants, of the accusers, to the Cabinet Secretary and very many others of our clients. With over 30 lawyers, we found out that the evidence that we have does not meet the threshold to take Aisha Juma or any other of our clients through the criminal process system.
We stand here as the firm of Musyoki Mogaka Advocates and have been on record for one of our esteemed clients, the Honorable Aisha Jumwa, who is the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Public Service and Gender, was in court and has been in court accused of the alleged murder charges. And in the spirit of giving a proper defense to our client, we reviewed the evidence that the prosecution had supplied us with. And in reviewing our evidence, we are of the opinion and advice that the evidence is not sufficient to hold the charges that have been preferred to our clients.
Elsewhere, police have asked the court to be allowed to detain an auctioneer for 14 days to allow complete investigations of malicious damage to property located in Westlands, Nairobi County. The prosecution told Principal Magistrate Gilbert Shikwe that the auctioneer, through hired goons, demolished and took away doors, windows and other personal properties belonging to Niraj Shah. The demolition of the residential property occurred on November 5th, 2022, with police now seeking more time to collect evidence and record statements from witnesses. And finally, a witness has told the court that he spoke to 2 police officers accused of killing the Kianjokoma brothers. Felix Njagi, an uncle to the 2 brothers, says the officers engaged him not knowing he was a relative to the deceased. He told the court one of the officers, Mr. Mwaniki, indicated to him that the family of the 2 boys will be compensated. I felt bad he was equating money to the lives of our children, he told the court. The case has been adjourned to 27th February next year. Collins Lusweti, TV 47, Nairobi.
And following the ravaging drought that has been witnessed in many parts of the country, a section of Kenyans from Subukia in Nakuru County has started an initiative to distribute food and water to the affected counties, especially the neighboring Baringo County. Take a look.
For a long time now, over 20 counties in Kenya have been grappling with the ongoing drought that has been occasioned by lack of rain for 4 successive rainy seasons. According to the National Drought Management Authority, over 4.3 million Kenyans are in a dire situation requiring emergency humanitarian assistance. Areas such as Loruk, Baringo North, Mogotio and Tiati in Baringo County have been greatly affected by drought. Jennifer Cherogoni, a resident in Loruk, says children and young people have started moving out of their homes in search of food, which has affected their education too.
Watoto wengine wametoroka kwa manyumba. Mtoto amekimbilia jirani anasema unisaidie kidogo, labda hiyo jirani ni afadhali kidogo. Lakini wengi wamekulwa na njaa sana. Hatuna lunch, hatuna chochote.
Residents are also losing their cattle due to lack of pasture and water, and they are calling on the government and well-wishers to come to their aid.
Takupatia watoto wetu kazi na kuchunga sisi na kutafutia sisi chakula. Sisi nimeumia kwa njaa. Hakuna kitu natua. Mbuzi mekuba. Ng'ombe mekuba.
However, they now have a reason to smile after residents of Subukia in neighboring Nakuru County started an initiative to distribute food and water to the affected families under the umbrella of King'ori Nguruike Foundation. The foundation is currently collecting donations from other Kenyans, churches, business people, and other well-wishers in order to prevent deaths caused by hunger.
It is not good for Subukia to have surplus, whereas in Baringo they are dying of hunger. So we decided it's good for us to come to Baringo and also feed our neighbors. I would appeal to the regions that they have been blessed with the harvest for them to care about their neighbors. It is a time for a Kenya to share with a Kenyan.
Sylvia Nyongesa, TV 47.
Right, remember you can always share to those who do not have in those far-flung areas and those who are affected by drought. And something else, human rights organizations have called on Fafi Member of Parliament Salah Yakub to withdraw his sentiments he made, claiming that a section of the United Democratic Alliance, UDM members of Parliament, wanted the scrapping of presidential term limits. This story was produced by Andrew Juma.
A day after Fafi Member of Parliament Yakub Salah disclosed a move by a section of UDA members of Parliament to introduce a bill in Parliament seeking to extend President Ruto's tenure, a number of Kenyans have condemned the talk.
Kwa sababu itakuwa ni kughadhabisha, ina maana wengine watafungiwa, kuna watu ambao watafungiwa hawataendelea kufanya na kupiga kura tena. Ina maana kuna watu ambao, kuna viongozi wengi ambao wananuia kugombea, lakini hawataenda watakuwa wamefungiwa kwa sababu
term limits for president should be two terms, and that's what we advocate as the residents of Kisii. We want term limits not to extend, but if we elected Ruto, he should deliver services to the people of Kenya.
Term limit wacha ikue miaka 10 venye ilikuwa, otherwise mimi ningekuwa kwa wale ambao walitengeneza sheria ya 2010, term limit ingekuwa miaka 8.
On Wednesday, human rights defenders led by the Haki Africa Group, Mathare Social Justice Center, Kituo cha Haki Group, Institute for Land Governance and Human Rights, among others, joined hands to condemn the move.
Resist mutilating the Constitution, resist. Resist. Resist mutilating the Constitution, resist. Resist. We also believe that the democratic practice across the world is for 2 terms for presidents, and this is the acceptable norm and rule of good governance, and this is our culture.
We shall not allow politicians who are sycophants to wage a war among Kenyans when the constitution is very clear on what is needed to be done.
According to them, the country risks being divided in two if the sentiments by the Fafi MP are not properly dealt with, which could increase tension in the country.
President Ruto should assure Kenyans that his government will work within the Constitution of Kenya and will not directly or indirectly dilute the democratic principles guaranteed within.
Tutaendelea kusukuma, tutaendelea kuongea mpaka tuhakikishe haki imepatikana.
The group has asked the MP to come out in public and apologize to Kenyans, pointing out that President Ruto should also come out clearly and state his position on the matter.
Implement Katiba, implement. Implement. Implement Katiba, implement. Implement.
The opposition members of Parliament, led by the minority leader Opiyo Wandayi, Suna East MP Junet Mohammed, were among the first to condemn the proposal, asking UDA party to focus on delivering on its promises to Kenyans instead of focusing on office term limits.
That any attempt to create a life presidency in this country, like the one we see obtaining in Uganda, shall be resisted vigorously.
Viva comrades, viva! Viva! Viva Kenyans, viva!
Viva! And now to the race for the ELA slots. 28 Kenyans have been nominated to battle it out for the 9 slots to represent Kenya in the East Africa Legislative Assembly, even as some big names were dropped out in the 11th hour. And as our parliamentary reporter Elizabeth Mutuku reports, Kenya Kwanza has presented 15 names, with Azimio presenting 12 names to the regional parliament. There is only one independent candidate who qualified out of the 16 who applied for the job.
After a week-long of vetting Kenyans who had shown interest in serving the East Africa Legislative Assembly, EALA, only 28 nominees have qualified for the job. However, a fierce battle for the 9 EALA slots is expected, with Kenya Kwanza presenting 15 names, Azimio la Umoja 12 names, while only one independent candidate out of 16 that had applied made it to the last stage.
What we find in respect of each candidate and whether we certify them to be duly nominated or not. Thank you.
The Kenya Kwanza Brigade nominated former Mombasa gubernatorial aspirant Hassan Omar, nominated Senator David Ole Sankok, former Mbalambala MP Abdikadir Aden. Head of the list in the Kenya Kwanza nominees includes former Nandi woman representative Zipporah Kering, Nairobi lawyer Okengo Nyambane, former United Republican Party URP Secretary General Frederick Muteti, former nominated Senator Falhada Deko, and the firstborn daughter of the former long-serving Criminal Investigation Department Director, the late Arap To, Former Saboti constituency aspirants Jonas Kuko, former Gembe Central MP Cyprian Kubai, and former West Pokot woman representative Lilian To. This in the Kenya Kwanza list that will be battling to get one of the 5 positions include Rebecca Merikeju, Godfrey Maina Karobia, Yasser Ali Sheikh, and Salim Mohamed Busidi.
The Alliance has complied with the rules in terms of nomination and even in terms of gender balance. We have endeavored to ensure that there is also regional balance of our nominees. We wish all the 15 nominees all the best as they embark on their campaigns for election, as at when the presiding officers allow them access to Parliament to be able to speak to members of Parliament to campaign. And we wish them all the best.
Twists and turns were witnessed before the final Azimio la Umoja list was presented to the clerk of the committees for vetting. In the end, Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka's son Kennedy Musyoka, Raila Odinga's daughter Winnie Odinga, Jubilee Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni, and Mombasa businessman Mohamed Shabal made it to the list. Others who will be battling for the 4 positions set aside for the Azimio 1 Kenya are former Kieni Lomeka Kaninkega, former Shinyalu MP Justus Kizito, former Wajir woman representative Fatuma Gedi, former Kitutu Masaba MP Timothy Bosire, and former Wajir South MP Mohamed Dirie, Winfred Mutua, Helen Deti, and Beatrice Askul.
Between the candidates and the would-be voters, or the voters for that matter. And ultimately, when the final tally is taken on the 17th of November, may the best man or woman win.
KANU Secretary General Nick Slat, Oburu Odinga's son Jaoko Oburu, and Jalango Midiwo, brother to the late Jakoyo Midiwo, are among prominent Kenyans that have missed out. However, KANU party leader Gideon Moi withdrew from the race. Extensive lobbying is expected in Parliament as from tomorrow, as 28 qualified members to represent Kenya in the Yala Assembly are expected to go for vote hunting ahead of voting on 17th this month. Elizabeth Mutuku, TV47 Palm Biddings, Nairobi.
From that, President William Ruto and Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the president of South Africa, have vowed to spearhead Africa's development agenda, saying the region has greatly been affected by COVID-19 pandemic, leaving many suffering. President Ramaphosa further says Africa has the capacity to manufacture COVID-19 vaccine and other vaccines.
To scale up, we can't be running after a number of countries around the world and say, when we are sick, we want you to supply us with vaccines and syringes and therapeutics and so on. We've got to make our own. This is Africa's century, and we must capture it and demonstrate to ourselves and those who will come after us that we did take up the opportunities. And now we've already demonstrated that we can. We can make vaccines here on the continent.
And speaking of Kenya and South Africa, Kenyans will be allowed to travel to South Africa beginning next week, next year, I beg your pardon, in a 90-day free visa regime using their ordinary passports after South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, in collaboration with the Ministry of Trade, South Africa, gave Kenyans a leeway for better opportunities. The two countries signed a memorandum of understanding that will see the two nations enjoy business and development partnerships. Paul Kirobe, the details.
In the next 2 months, Kenyans will enjoy the partnership between Kenya and South Africa to enter South Africa for business purposes and a new visa regime that looks into unlocking the potential of the two countries. And as this happens, the president says they'd also agreed on a return policy when immigration laws and policies are breached, meaning those with false papers will be dealt with according to the law.
That we have to jump little hoops to be able to get to the other side. Thank you very much, Mr. President. On behalf of the people and government of Kenya, we appreciate your gesture, your leadership, and your personal intervention in making sure that our officials are aligned so that we can work together.
We are going to be hands-on, and it's not going to be a loophole that we have opened for those who want to transgress immigration regulations and who want to come to slip into South Africa without proper papers and so forth.
President William Ruto invited his South African counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa at State House before inviting him for a business engagement with the Kenyan business community at the Kenyatta International Convention Center for a roundtable meeting to unlock trade and business partnership between the two countries.
Our borders from being hurdles to being bridges. We must turn our borders from being hurdles to being facilitative so that we can do trade, we can do business, we can make investment, and we can move people, goods, and services freely.
The partnership comes at the backdrop of the poor state of the economy that the country is grappling with the South African leadership inviting Kenya to open up warehouses in South Africa for business purposes. Minister for Trade and Investment Moses Kuria says there is a trade imbalance between the two countries.
And we have agreed with Minister Patel to set up a joint committee to unlock the land-tariff barriers which are hindering trade between our two nations. We had a very strict instructions from our two presidents to do everything possible to look at the issues of logistics, to the issues of delays in our borders, and Kenya is actually taking the first step by establishing the first two border custom warehouses, one in Johannesburg and one in Pretoria, to support our SMEs.
Saying that President Ramaphosa has given us a job to prioritize economic relationships with Kenya. As leader of the African Union during the COVID period, President Ramaphosa championed the idea of Africa making its own medical products, from vaccines to face masks to ventilators. As during the meetings of the G20
Kenya is going to set up warehouses in South Africa for Kenyan goods that must come into South Africa. We welcome that and we are open to that. Before coming into this meeting hall, President Ruto was ushering me through the various stalls that were here, and he's a very good salesman. He was, all morning he's been trying to sell me Kenyan tea, Kenyan coffee.
President William Ruto took a step of inviting South African companies to be part of his affordable housing scheme that he has been undertaking as part of his government's agenda.
We want South African companies to come and work with us. Bring your technology, bring your investment. We are going to give you the land. We're going to build the infrastructure for you. We're going to make sure there is a sewer line, there is a road, there is electricity, there is water. And when you complete those houses, we are going to buy them from you. As soon as you complete, you hand over the keys to us, we pay you, you go to the next project as we look for mortgage for our citizens.
The president is targeting to construct 200,000 houses earmarked for low-income earners and which will be constructed every year. Paul Kirobi, TV47, Nairobi.
And speaking of matters, visas and passports, Kenya Airways is now expected to return to its normal operations from Saturday, November 12th. The pilots returned to work on Wednesday after court ordered them to end their 4 days-long strike, which had led to hundreds of flight cancellations and stranded thousands of passengers. And as a reporter Mike Agongo tells us, over 5,000 of the 12,000 affected passengers have been airlifted.
The pilot strike, which began on Saturday, exacerbated the woes facing the troubled national carrier, which has vowed to do everything possible to return to normalcy by Saturday, November 12, 2022. In a statement to its passengers Wednesday, KQ said to meet the needs of their customers, normal operations will officially resume on Saturday. Part of the statement read, and I quote, "Dear customer, we look forward to welcoming you back on board with normal flight operations resuming by the 12th of November 2022. Please visit our official website for more information regarding your flight." End of quote. At the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, some passengers said they were offered alternative flights in an effort to reduce the number of 12,000 stranded passengers.
Yeah, today I think it's very good. If you look at the tent, it's very calm. There are not so many people, so I think everyone is being sorted out. People are going to travel as per plan, so I think it's really good news. It's really good news.
Yes, tulikuwa najua kuna mgomo, lakini nilikuja tu kuthibitisha niko na fly leo. Nikaambiwa sasa kukuja leo naambiwa tumeahirisha flight yako ni kesho.
It really set me back because I had to connect with another flight from Entebbe via Dubai. So I have missed that flight as well.
Most annoying aspect is that since yesterday I've been trying to get in touch with the airline because I was told that there was a possibility of flight reschedules. No one was responding. I got in this morning, went through until I got to the counter to check in, only to be told that the flights have been cancelled.
By Wednesday evening, KQ had scheduled and operated 48 flights out of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, JKIA. By November 10th, 2022, the scheduled departures were 43 flights, a translation of 50% of the normal operations. By Friday, November 11th, KQ says it shall operate 70% of its network and expect to resume full operations by Saturday, November 12th. Over 5,000 of the 12,000 disrupted passengers have been uplifted. However, the national carrier still has about 200 guests accommodated in hotels across Nairobi, who shall be rebooked in the next 2 days. KQ has also uplifted approximately 50 tons of cargo.
To KQ, I think they put so many people in big hotels over a period of 3 or 4 days. Like when I was in Johannesburg, it's just a group of I don't know how many people were all put together in a hotel. Which was really unprecedented. So I think that is a loss on their part because finally they were to book us back to the flights coming to Kenya. So I think they spent a lot of money.
The strike caused passengers delays and the export of agricultural products in the country. Striking KQ pilots were ordered to return to work while negotiations between their union and Kenya Airways management continues. KQ pilots have been on strike since Saturday, November 5th, which ended Tuesday after Labour Court judge in Nairobi Ann Moore ordered them to end the strike. Mike Kagwongo, TV 47, Nairobi.
And from the skies to the court, and the Anti-Corruption Court is expected to rule today on whether or not to dismiss graft charges against Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. The new development came after the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nuruddin Haji, filed an application at the court yesterday seeking to dismiss charges in the 7.4 billion Kenyan shillings case for lack of sufficient evidence. TV47's Apollo Kamau reports on a day the Directorate of Criminal Investigations was put on the spot.
Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, alongside 9 other persons, will be following closely a crucial ruling at the Anti-Corruption Court on Thursday morning, when the court delivers a crucial verdict that could draw up graft charges leveled against him, amounting to 7.4 billion shillings. Charges he maintains were politically instigated due to his alliance with the then Deputy President William Ruto under President Uhuru Kenyatta. Director of Public Prosecutions Nuruddin Haji, through his legal team, on Wednesday made an application before trial magistrate Victor Wakumile to withdraw the case due to lack of sufficient evidence, while accusing the Directorate of Criminal Investigations DCI under George Kinoti of frustrating Haji with lack of evidence for a period of 1 year, despite having written numerous letters.
The DPP independently reviewed the matter and concluded that the evidence as it is does not meet the evidential threshold, required to amount a successful prosecution of this case.
Gachagua and his co-accused defense teams supported DPP's application, pointing out the case was headed for an acquittal, given no prosecution witness had given evidence, and therefore Advocate Kioko Kilukumi told the court the prosecution was saving the court's time. In a surprise turn of events, DCI's lead investigator in Gachagua's case, Obadia Kuria, saw an affidavit saying he was pressured by DCI boss George Kinoti to recommend criminal charges, which were corruption and economic crimes, against Gachagua alongside his co-accused.
This affidavit is drawn by you. It is not drawn by another person. It's not a lawyer drawing it for you. It is you who has drawn it. And you use the words immense pressure from Mr. Kinoti.
It's pressure.
Yes.
You work under pressure. Yes.
No, you use the words immense pressure from Mr. Kinoti.
It's pressure.
Events of the 21st of July 2021 at 3 in the morning, when Gachagua was arrested and taken to the DCI headquarters in Nairobi from Madeira, were revisited, including how he was held in custody over the weekend, despite the unavailability of evidence.
The first accused was arrested on Friday, 23rd July 2021 at 3 a.m. in Mathira, Nyeri County.
The court's charge sheet claims that Gachagua obtained 7.3 billion shillings through 3 bank accounts, money which the prosecution said was proceeds of crime. The case, among others, occurred between 2013 and 2020. Apul Kamau, TV47.
Thank you for that, Apollo Kumau, Mattis quote and all that. Now, I want us to shift focus to a conversation this particular morning matters the country's economy, and it comes on the backdrop of the new approved loan by the International Monetary Fund, about 52.8 billion Kenyan shillings. And as promised, this particular morning we'll be interacting with engineer Othimba Crispus, who's on my immediate right, an economic analyst, and also Professor, should I start with Professor, then Doctor? Yeah. Frederick Ogola, an economic expert. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. And then also we'll be joined later on by Honorable Isaac Mora, who is the former nominated senator and also was in the Senate Budget and Appropriations Committee, to discuss all about our country's economy, basically. And I believe we should... Let me start with you, Dr. Professor Ogola. Yes. This particular loan, walk us through the whole loan arrangement, because this is the fourth review. So walk us our viewers through the whole loan arrangements and basically what it means to Kenya.
Yeah, first of all, you know that IMF is looking at how to salvage Kenya, and I think that this kind of facility in economics, we call it conditional facility. Remember when the president and the vice president took over, they were saying they will stop borrowing money and they want to put some austerity measures. But what they have discovered is that when your head is under the water, that's when you look conditional facility, meaning that you can't breathe, you cannot import, you cannot be able to offer the services you require. So you're forced to borrow. So the conditional facility we are taking is not going to go too much into what we call development, but we'll be going to sort out the government bills that the government cannot be able to pay. Remember, the issue of pending bills in this country has been a long-gone story. Remember that if you look at Nairobi County, 98 billion shillings not paid. That's a debt. Go to counties, if Nairobi has around 98 billion shillings not paid, you can now start extrapolating different countries. There will be an average of 25 billion each every county. And this is money which is supposed to go to them so they can pay these pending bills. So I'm sure that there are so many pending bills. Even if you go to Nairobi County itself, can you imagine they owe Standard Media 120 million, they owe Nation 20 million. So there's so much debt that everybody owes everyone. So I'm sure with this money coming in, debt must be paid, and then realize maybe money will start to circulate in the economy. I think that's what could mean to Wananchi.
So basically this loan, the whole priority will be paying out the debt first.
Yes, because remember there are two types of loans IMF can give. There's a loan called conditional facility, meaning that if you are in trouble, you cannot survive as a country, IMF gives you money to survive. Like, for example, if you have a debt you need to pay, for example, you have food to put on the table, you can't. Even you can go and borrow money from the bank. That's like a conditional facility. There's the other one, which is called a facility you take from the bank, and this facility you take from the bank is more or less to help you set up the economy so that you don't get into trouble. You know, you can go borrow money from the bank, You take that money from the bank, and that money you use it to invest in something to stop you from being broke. But conditional facility is a facility you take when you're already broke and you're trying to get out of brokenness. So the economy is in the sense that you need to borrow money. Remember, President Uhuru Kenyatta made his speech in Madaraka last time, Madaraka Day, and he said, you'll have to borrow. And of course, the narrative then was that both Azimio and Kenya Kwanza were saying they don't have to borrow. The truth is that you cannot survive on borrowing. You cannot survive without borrowing, because look, our GDP our savings to GDP is 12%. We sell 12% as a nation to GDP. Because of that, we have to borrow. In fact, why the president is talking about the culture of savings is because if you are saving only 12% of your GDP, where do you get your money? It means 88% must be through debt. And of course, now we can discuss about whether it's a good debt or a bad debt. The issue here is how this money is spent. It's not too much to be with the borrowing. I'm sure you're going to raise the issues about debt ceiling.
Definitely.
No, of course, I don't care about debt ceiling. First, if you look at the Kenyan GDP, the debt to GDP, for us, we are doing 75%. If you go to they're doing 150. Japan is doing 273% debt to GDP. And America is doing 133% debt to GDP. So the issue is not percentage. The ceiling was just brought to bring a bit of prudence in borrowing. But nowadays we move to what is called debt anchoring. Debt anchoring is whereby, are you able to qualify for loan? There's economic fundamentals able to qualify for loans. Have you been paying your loans? This is more important to us than discussing about the debt ceiling.
All right. Engineer, the IMF says that, basically our economy is growing and all that. They actually project our growth to 5.3% in 2022. And they obviously, put, say amid domestic policy tightening and a global shutdown, a slowdown that are likely to also weigh down on growth in 2023. Do you share this views by the IMF that, actually our economy is actually growing?
Well, it's true. Fundamentally, our Kenyan economy is growing. The only challenge is that not many Kenyans are experiencing that growth in terms of the wealth, their own wealth or personal wealth growing in tandem with the national economy. So I would want to challenge the current government to transit from just being good in numbers in terms of economic growth, in terms of the country's overall growth, but in the reality to the Kenyan mwananchi, because a lot of households are having challenges in terms of sustaining the kind of cost of living that we are going through right now, yet the incomes that they hold or they earn are not commensurate to the kind of cost of living they are going through. So for me, it's just to encourage the Kenyan government, yes, as you continue borrowing, can you direct those resources that you borrow into areas that can lift as many Kenyans as possible from poverty. We also have challenges that are beyond us. The global economy is also going through a very difficult path, just not because of the Ukraine war, but also we have climate change that is now really causing a lot of challenges in many economies. And those are issues that maybe we can take as an opportunity. You've seen how the president has taken advantage of the COP27 forum to really send the message out there that poor countries are really suffering because of the bad behavior of the big economies. If Kenya takes this position of being the champion of this, and a lot of investments come through us, can we use those investments responsibly so that over the next 5 years, we can take full advantage of the economic opportunities that will come with the investment in climate change, the whole global economy trying to make investment to lift the kind of challenges it's going through, so that we position ourselves not just a regional leader, but a continental leader in terms of direction we give the African continent.
All right, before actually cross to you, I wanted to get a reaction. I had asked him the priority for the loan, basically for the 52.8 billion. He talks about this should be, first of all, pay debt. And you're done. Engineer, what do you think this 52.8 billion? Because this is a new government, a 58-day-old government, and when it came on board, it says that we inherited empty coffers. So what should it be doing with the 52.8 billion first and foremost?
So
almost.
When you get headlines showing like 35 billion was paid to ghost workers, when you get headlines as far back as 2017 from inheriting 65 billion debt from Nairobi County, now it has become 99, yet we have an NMS that spent 28 billion. Then the issue of questioning these debts arises. So, you know, we are a country that suffers from what we call trust deficit. A lot of these numbers being thrown around are not always very accurate. So for me, I would be very cautious in attempting to clear these debts, but look at those debts truly that are very critical. If you, for example, you've engaged a service provider or a service of people, you can pay. But if there are areas where you feel there is doubt, please be cautious in terms of paying those debts. Can we also take that money in areas where that will have real economic benefits as soon as possible? I'll give you an example. Over the COVID period, we had over 3 projects that were done in Nairobi. The Nairobi Expressway, the Western Bypass, and the road from James Gishuru to Rironi. Cumulatively, those projects were supposedly said they spent over 100 billion. If 100 billion is poured within a 25-kilometer radius, you would feel it. There'll be scarcity of cement because this person is consuming so much cement. There'll be scarcity of labor because this project is consuming so many laborers.
Water also.
And all those things. But we didn't feel it. A lot of us continue enjoying life as normal, yet 100 billion was supposedly spent within the 25-kilometer radius of Nairobi.
Whatever, not the whole country.
Exactly. What if now we are going to spend 500 billion in paying debts? Are we going to feel it? So we need to be very careful in terms of how we direct resources, because we may put 500 billion, but it will be end up buying apartments in Kilimani and Kileleshwa and not helping people in Turkana and Lamu, where there are real challenges that we need to address.
And there's actually coming to that, even as you chime in, the whole priority areas, because when you look at the drought that came in, it had to slow down Ruto's economic ambitions, basically economic revival ambitions. So the whole priority areas that now he should be focusing on that so that we as Kenyans can actually feel it.
Yeah, by the way, first of all, thank you, Merry Christmas. The first thing you have to understand, in economics, there are 2 things which is good to distinguish. There's what you call economic growth and economic development. They are very different. Economic growth is what you're now projecting, 5.3% growth in GDP, growth in income. But you see, GDP grows, you can collect taxes because that's national revenue by collecting taxes, isn't it? But the problem is, after you collect these taxes, which is how we used to calculate the GDP, where do you put the money? Now, that's the main question. For example, when you put the money in expressway, you put money in building bypass, are you really creating economic development? Because economic growth is simply growth in GDP. But then, economic development is how you improve what is called goods of life. For example, how do you increase access to healthcare? How do you increase access to education, literacy? How do you increase people's ability to consume goods by buying food, stuffs, and their transport and the rest? So if you don't put that money in those areas where somebody can access better education, better healthcare, quality healthcare, somebody cannot be able to afford basic needs, then now there's no economic development, because economic development means that you can access goods of life, which is mostly, as I mentioned to you. So if this money is being put in road, then you ask yourself, how does that road translate into people's access to goods of life, like I mentioned? But let me just tell you here what's the problem with the issue of this expressway and the rest. Chinese were contracted. Imagine Chinese were the contractors for even supplying cement, supplying ballast, supplying sand. Then they subcontracted a Kenyan who has a lorry because they don't have trucks. That deal, the way it was signed, for me, it's the problem. I'm engineer, you know this very well.
Plus also the SGR? Or?
Yes, all of them. If a Kenyan was contracted, when you're a contractor, your margins are higher. You can take a child to school, you can pay for your relatives this and that, you can be able to grow. But if you are subcontracted, the Chinese will squeeze you on the margin. And when they squeeze on the margin, you don't have surplus to put in. That's why Nairobi has never felt it. But had there been the people who are distributing sand, ballast, even quarries. If this was done by Kenyan directly by contracting, not subcontracting, it could have been easier to fill the money. So when I talk about priority areas, what is the main thing ailing Kenya at the moment? It is, what's happening is that electricity cost has gone up. This has a ripple effect across the board on manufacturing, production, everything else. You know, if you do shopping basket now, 1,000 bob used to be enough for you to have lunch with a family of around 6 people. Now you can't, because once you buy oil, you are literally only going to buy salt. Now you need around 2,060 to organize a lunch for a family. I'm sure, engineer, this is something you feel. Mm-hmm. Now, if you go to the issue of the so-called middle class, you know, middle class, when the middle class is growing, there's a ripple effect at the bottom, because the middle class tip, you know the tip now, when you go to a restaurant, where you used to give a tip for 200, you give 100. Are you seeing how you're affecting those people down there? Or where you used to give a tip, you stop giving a tip. The middle class do employ. The middle class create businesses. Now, do you know the Kenyan middle class do not know where they are going to go for Christmas holiday, because they are now saying, for me to travel to Busia and back 30K in fuel. Now, I'm asking myself, why should I leave my house to stay idle in Nairobi, then I travel to Busia to go and stay there? The consequence of going to Kenya for Christmas is that my house will stay here empty. I'm still paying fuel, I'm still paying everything else. And there at home, I will not have money to give out. So I'll stay at home, I'll stay rather in my house in Nairobi, and the impact goes to the person down there. Okay. So priority area is, how can we grow the middle class? Then secondly, according to me, how can we breathe optimism into the economy? You know, Christmas, you know very well that if someone tells you that the economy is dilapidated and the economy is in shambles, then I'm telling you, go to the bank and borrow money and invest in this economy, which is dilapidated, which is in shambles. I'm sure that that does not make sense to you, isn't it? So we are trying to say, first, the president, they need to breathe what's called optimism in the economy and tell Kenyans we are going to go far. Kibaki inherited one of the worst economies, but he never spent a day preaching about how bad it is. He preached hope and put money in education. So now that they're talking about now withdrawing money from funding universities, do you know education is the highest spender in national budget? So if you reduce spending in education, you're going to make so many people have very bad life. And in fact, students go to school, they buy food from Mama Mboga here, they use motorcycle for going to school. These are the areas where the economy is vibrant. And I'm sure that, to talk about priorities, please, I'm sure you're saying you don't want to finance consumption, but indirectly you must finance consumption, because if you want to finance production and you don't finance consumption, where will the money come from to buy what you have produced? Right, so I'm sure that is the catch-22.
Right. Let's take a short break. We'll be hold your thought, engineer. We'll definitely be taking a look at the conditions that IMF had sent before, and how the ripple effect that it is having in the new government, and all that, and even the whole Hustler Fund, and how to ensure that it is going to be sustainable. Stick around. This is Morning Cafe.
Well, do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians,
and music bands every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga,
and music bands every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la Siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga,
and music bands every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. of Untold Stories.
Right, 4 minutes past the top of the hour, and we're talking about matters, the country's economy, basically, and I'm holding court with Engineer Othemba Crispus, who is an economic analyst, basically, and Professor Dr. Frederick Ogola, who is an economic expert. And Engineer.
Yes.
I was coming to, even as we chime into what Dr. was talking about, there were conditions put up before by IMF, and just to read it briefly, one of them, basically on the whole, for KPLC, basically, right, there you have it. So among the conditions set by the lender include having KPLC bridge its financial gap. So will you say the KPLC is working right now at tight rope so that it can cut the costs of the electricity and also ensure that it actually bridges its financial gaps by 2023?
KPLC is a very sad story where you are a monopoly, you have a huge customer base, you have no competition at all, and you still make losses. So we need to first understand, why does Kenya Power make losses in an economy where it has no competition? So is it in buying expensive power? Is it in distributing that power? Is it in the management of the company that we have a problem? Is it in the kind of deals that were signed on behalf of KPLC by previous administration that are dragging it down? So if we can be able to interrogate those issues and identify where are the burdens that are dragging Kenya Power down, then we can have a proper conversation. So IMF is just coming from an outsider and saying, guys, if you need money, I see a problem in putting money in Kenya Power as it is. So for you to get money from me, I need you to restructure. But the internal issues that are bedeviling Kenya Power, our own, we must be able to find out what are those problems that are bedeviling Kenya Power. Is it historical contracts with the IPPs? Is it the connection to power from 2 million to 8 million people who are probably this million are not paying for that power? Is it the procurement of defective equipment that is a problem? Is it many Kenyans are not paying for power? So there are so many issues that we need to interrogate.
Will the full privatization of KPLC, and even as just to mention KPLC, now it brings up the whole topic of even Kenya Airways also, will the full privatization of such state-owned enterprises be the solution?
The only success story in terms of privatization has been Kenyan. Mumias was privatized, but it's no more today. Kenya Airways was privatized. 20 years later, we have challenges. So we need to really interrogate the issue of privatization. When we privatize, what is the issue? So we need to understand that, yes, privatization is a good thing, because government is not supposed to be in the business of selling and buying. Government is supposed to be in the business of facilitating consumption and production. So when we are not able to provide facilitation and government has to do business, then there is a problem. Our economy is the economic structure of this country, the problem. How do we align the buyers and consumers? Who is the facilitators? What is the role of the facilitators? The county governments have come in. Are they dragging the process of facilitating business in the economy? So we need to be able to say, yes, we want to privatize because it's a good thing. But when we privatize, at what cost do we do that? At whose interest do we do that? Do we want to privatize and end up with an element of state capture where a few people control a few sectors of the economy? We have seen what happened to Russia in the late 90s. A few people took over the state assets. Then it became an element of state capture. Then Putin had to come and overturn that. But even up to today, it's only a few friends of Putin who control certain sectors of the economy. So also we don't want to privatize and end up with a few oligarchs who will control the Kenyan economy. We need to be able to be sure that when we do this privatization, it's me and you who take over, but also the management that we appoint there is people who we can trust. Our biggest challenge in this country is that we can't trust anyone. We can't even trust our own. So we have a serious trust deficit in whatever we do. And the day we'll restore that in terms of inculcating national values as a country, then probably our life will be much better.
All right. Dr. Even as you come in on the whole privatization matter, do you feel like we as Kenyans should be prepared for high costs of electricity from the KPLC?
Yeah, because see, if you look, I told you before that we are taking what's called a conditional facility.
Yeah.
A conditional facility means the lender gives you the conditions to give you money. But the opposite of that is what's called precautionary facility. Is whereby you are the one who has applied under your terms. And this way you are being told we can give you money under the following terms. I think it's more favorable to go and say Kenya may sink into economic crisis 5 years from now. But to do that, give us 100 billion loan so that we invest in areas of the economy that will stop us from getting into trouble. For example, if you go and tell your dad, Daddy, I know very well that in 2 years I'll be very broke. But to stop being broke, can you give me 2 million? I'll be able to set up some small side hustle, and this small side hustle will give you extra income so that I can keep my family running, so I don't come running to you, or I have to take my entire family to come live with you because I cannot afford. I'm sure your father will be more likely to do that. But if you go and tell your father that, Daddy, I've come home, there's no way to eat, now I am here, then your father will tell you, look here, I'll give you this money in condition that you have to do 1, 2, 3. So that's where we are starting from. That conditional facility means that the owner of the money tells you how their money should be spent under what circumstances. Remember the so-called structural adjustment programs, which was there during Moi's time, where my IMF and World Bank told Kenyans, cut the cost of government, you cannot have this one, you cannot have that one. So if your father is financing you under condition, they tell you, you cannot have a second girlfriend, you cannot drive a car, you have to use public transport. But if you are the one who has gone and applied and said, if you give me 2 million, I'll be better off, your father don't care whether you're buying a car or not.
Then during Moi Kibaki's time, Kenya, stayed away from this type of credit. Should we read from the same script and also stay away from this?
I'm telling you that in economy is just like religion. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 16 says, nothing is new under the sun. So whatever the current government is going through is not new. We just look in history, and a good student in strategy must be good in history, and economists are always very good in history. So we look back and said, what did Kibaki do? Kibaki simply stopped domestic borrowing and borrowed outside for development, isn't it? And ensured that Kenyans created for themselves businesses that grew and there was money in people's pockets. Because what he was trying to say now, if people don't have money in their pockets, it does not make sense. Like now when you tell people, I'm going to flag what's called relief food. Do you know that relief food is kind of a good feeling for the person giving it, but it is so humiliating for the person taking it. Let's say, for example, if I see my mother lining up with a bowl to pick relief food, it is such a humiliating thing. And that's why President Uhuru Kenyatta thought of more, give you subsidy, have money in your pocket, buy your own things rather than me now coming lorries, because logistics, just the logistics of carrying food from here to Turkana. Can you imagine that is very expensive, but they do it because somebody will supply the trucks, isn't it? It is easier to give somebody in Turkana subsidy to buy their food without anything moving from Nairobi to Turkana. But they see that I will be able to use my trucks. No, these guys have assets, isn't it? So there's a lot of things which we can go there. But let me just try to highlight a little bit about the fact that IMF is giving us conditions. Do you know IMF cannot give American conditions? The feeling is IMF believes that we don't know what to do our stuff. And in fact, when you talk about state capture, for me, I even call it neocolonialism. Because if somebody from New York comes to tell you what to do in Nairobi, how does it feel? Do they believe in the CS Treasury that has been appointed by the president? Don't they know what to do? Why don't they come with the restructuring without being told to restructure? If you come to my house, even my father come to my house and tell me how to live with my wife, I won't feel nice. I want to know what to do where I'm doing stuff. So the issue of taking debt and where to put is important. Then the issue of privatization. Remember that all this privatization, it is not necessarily bad to have state corporations. In fact, if you go to some countries, state corporations perform much better than private corporations. Like if you go to some countries in the Nordics, the Nordic countries like Denmark, Sweden, public universities and public schools do better than private schools. Why do we have this feeling that public must be bad? The whole idea is to do with leadership.
How about militarizing it, as the KMC has done, and now speaks of the whole leadership kind of forum. Maybe the militarizing it might be because the military have a good system of the leadership as compared to
that is a direction, because President Uhuru Kenyatta discovered that you will go on and on to talk with this politician to lead. They will not. That's why he took NMS and told them run Nairobi. I'm sure you saw things were much better, isn't it? They brought in KRA to collect revenue on behalf of the county. Now the present governor has thrown away KRA and is collecting it on his own. Let me ask you, is there anybody more effective in collecting revenue or taxes more than KRA? I don't think so. So what is the reason? The reason should be another thing. Could be that he wants to touch the money directly, isn't it? And you saw that all counties in Kenya have a potential to collect 173 billion Kenya shillings. That is the potential. They were given a target to collect 53.3 billion in the last financial year. They collected only 64% of that money, which means that they are not even they're only collecting 30% of their total potential, meaning that there's a gap in revenue collection potential of this country. And in fact, before borrowing, let's bring back what Kibaki said. Kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. Why don't we collect our revenue first and see we have reached a ceiling in collecting our revenue than going to borrow, because borrowing is costly.
We'll definitely get into the whole tax reforms and all that, the whole revenue collection, but then still on the whole conditions. Engineer, the whole ripple effects of these conditions, they have definitely, this new government is definitely going to feel it. How should they react to this, the whole new conditions?
Every condition has another phase that we don't look at. The human cost. People will lose jobs. Businesses will lose opportunities. And therefore, the government must be very, very careful in terms of weighing between what the Kenyan people will lose vis-a-vis what Kenyan people will gain. So not all the conditions I think they should subscribe to. There are some conditions I think we should be able to say as a country, fundamentally, this one we can't handle. For example, the issue of university education. Education is very dear to Kenyans. If there are structural issues within the universities, let's address them. But in terms of funding the universities, we cannot afford to go to the American way, where American graduates carry debt for over 20, 30 years after finishing university. As a country, that's not a burden we can handle. But there are some burdens we can avoid. So therefore, I want to just ask the government to take all these measures with a measure of caution. Not all of them are good for the country. We've been through this path in the 90s. We have seen Kibaki avoid them. How did Kibaki avoid them and still make it to the point where he went through 2 elections, one post-election, and still had economic growth with all these challenges? We had an economic downturn in 2007, 2008, but Kenyans never felt it. We had a post-election during the same period. The global economy was suffering, but us as a country, no Kenyan felt that there was a challenge economically. We had political issues, but we didn't feel the economic challenges as we are feeling today. So therefore, we need to look at the Kibaki economics and see what can we borrow from there and pick it up from there. I like what Gachagua said. Let us pick from where Kibaki left. But also, as we are picking from where Kibaki left, can we also learn from the Kibaki administration? Can we invest in the right people in terms of governance? I'm a bit worried when I see a government where only one engineer who is a police boss Yet the country wants to invest so much in infrastructure. We have seen deals being entered wrongly because of having the wrong people in those kind of deals. We have the express highway where we have spent over $600 million.
So basically, there was nothing.
Yet we didn't even tell the contractor,
the Jubilee
you
government.
need to invest $50 million to repair the road below. Now, as a country, we must do that. We have the Lake Turkana power production wind power company, where because we delayed in constructing a transmission line, we were ending up paying 18 billion Kenya just like that. For yet that project, the value was $750 million. Yet we paid 20% of that to a contractor because we delayed consuming that power. I mean, we need to invest in the right economic experts, infrastructure experts, and avoid these issues of being politically correct in whatever deals we enter as a country. We are really tying this country into so many expensive burdens that are not necessary.
Was there anything correct in the Jubilee government? Because, you know, as even as you've quoted how the deputy president said that we should, take it from where Kibaki left it from. Was there anything correct done in the Jubilee government?
The idea of lifting our economy from number 13 to 6 was very good. But at what price is the problem? We have positioned our country globally as a very good economic hub. But at what cost to the Kenyan people? That is the question we need to answer.
Right. And definitely we're joined by the former nominated Senator Isaac Mora, as I had promised. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
All right. Welcome to you. Definitely your time is much appreciated. I want us to get your reaction on this, the approved International Monetary Fund, about 52.8 billion Kenyan shillings. What does this mean to the country, and the priority areas that the country should be focusing on? Because this new government said that they inherited empty coffers basically. So which kind of priority areas should they be focusing on?
It's interesting because we don't have a lot of fiscal headroom to actually accrue more public debt. But unfortunately, we're in a situation where if you're in a hole, you keep on digging. For the obvious reason that you just have to do it. Our fiscal revenue is not able to meet the budget. And you know very well, the government policy is that we need to reduce expenditure by about 300 billion. And why that is the case is because if you look at our current budget, it has to be, restructured and consolidated because it is very, very expensive to run government, as it were. We have about 3.3 trillion shillings in the budget, but then we are only collecting 2.1 trillion. So where do you get the deficit? So basically, this new money, of course, is conditional. And the priorities would be on areas to do with the development, but then you would find part of the money actually would go to recurrent expenditure so that you are able to release, exchequer to the various spending agencies within government. But of course, there's very good reason as to why it has been, procured at this point in time, because basically we are not doing very well. You can see we are just recovering from, the election fever, and that tells you that even the collection is not yet up to speed. It's now that people are going back to business. So I think all of those considerations will be put into place. Going forward. Of course, there are also pledges that the Kenya Kwanza administration made that also needs to be fulfilled in the short term. So, we have to interrogate exactly, this credit facility.
And actually on that, as someone who sat in the budgetary allocations, appropriations committee, I believe in the Senate, which particular state departments would, if you're there, should the government right now, will you advise the government right now to, focus on the whole funding of the loans?
No, I think that cannot be a matter of conjecture. Yeah, it is a matter of good planning. You can't just say you'll advise government because it was procured for a certain reason. So you have to look at why did the government go to IMF to look for money? What are the conditionalities, you see? The unfortunate thing, as I told you earlier, is because there has to be borrowing. This is a time where you expect that there should be no much borrowing, but unfortunately it has to happen. And I'm saying this because, yes, my experience in budget making process, borrowing should not be happening at this time of the year. You know, we are actually in November. What we're expecting is a mini budget in the name of supplementary, primarily because it's a new government. So the budget of 2022-2023 is really not the Kenya Kwanza budget. It was a Jubilee administration, or if you like, handshake budget. So it has to be redone. So these 52 billion is, of course, to meet the immediate needs that are required, and they would range. I would imagine largely developmental, but of course recurrent because of the shortfall of the targets that could have been not met by the KRA.
All right. Yeah. And before I cross over to Dr. Ri, how would you rate the progress on the whole fiscal adjustment in the country right now?
It is quite serious because, for example, I know the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, which gets about 2.1 billion every year. I was part of the people who approved it in the 11th Parliament to establish it. They have had to get a budget cut of 500 million. And so many state departments have had to also, you know, let go of their monies if at all we are to attain the 300 billion cut. And that means that then there's a lot of work that needs to be done. You know, for the last 10 years, we've spent about 25 trillion shillings, you know, in this economy. What we want to ask ourselves, is there a dividend? These projects, are they well thought out? Are they getting, what is their return on investment? What is the period, you know, given? Are they sustainable? We are dealing with the issue of SGR, for example, and you can see from the papers, you know, there is a whole issue of bloated, you know, expenditure. And, you know, people trying to cut corners and, you know, having, you know, government projects that are convinced primarily from the private sector in cahoots with the government officials, then you load it into the public debt, and yet it's not a public good as such. Because when you now, for example, return all of the clearing, you know, business in Mombasa, what are you transporting on the SGR? And yet for the lender, as early as 2019, they had broken even. So it's also a question of how do we, you know, clog, you know, the whole issue of public debt. How is our credit worthiness? Because that also is very, very important. And one of the things that we have never been able to do as a country is to really ascertain what is our sovereign debt. You know, when you talk about sovereign debt, we don't mean just public debt. Public debt is just part of it. It's also including what has been borrowed by the private sector in terms of, you know, economic development. But I'm very happy because it's not just about IMF borrowing. There are new, very serious contracts. I think President Ruto has done a very good job in Egypt by ensuring that you know, he signed over 500 billion worth of deals, and of course even Ramaphosa, you know, now that he's here, that connection between South Africa and Kenya is very, very critical in unlocking resources. Because yes, it is true. If you look at the plan of the Kenya Kwanza, it's very clear we don't have money, you know, to do so much that we want to. You have to have a very serious 18-month plan to recover, you know, space that has been lost in terms of fiscal headroom to do so much that the Wananchi requires us to do.
Okay, now on that also, Dr. Ri, you know, mentions the whole ambitious economic revivals by the president. What is that one mistake the president should not do? At this particular time, 58 days in the government, what is that one mistake the president should not do?
Economic mistake for me remains the issue of the negative vibes that I'm seeing in the economy. Like you hear my brother here, you know, we've been met in these arguments when I was talking about Azimio plans and he was in Kenya Kwanza. I was saying the mistake he should not make is that economy needs a positive vibe. And these things of saying we are going to cut this, we're going to cut that. I can tell Mheshimiwa Mwaura that even if you go home and tell your wife, the economy is bad, we are going to cut breakfast, we are going to cut this, you even make people feel so much hopelessness. Kenyans need to be optimistic. The economy is looking good. What they need to do is direction on how we are going to go to that good direction, rather than saying we are going to cut this. In fact, one thing I can say, he needs to go and study a little bit what Kibaki got right, and Uhuru also got some few things very right. Like when COVID hit and the global economy shrank by 3%, he promised us that this year we are growing by 0.3% when the global economy was shrinking. And he promised when he was making his speeches in Mashujaa Day in Kirinyaga, I think that's where it took place, by projecting a 6% growth in the economy. And he put stimulus packages into the economy to grow it. So the mistake is cutting money from the people does not work. What we want is putting more money into the economy, not cutting. And in fact, if you look at the two philosophies between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto, I can tell you these guys are so different economically, and I think that's what Kenya needs to know now. President Uhuru was an optimistic person in terms of the economy. Of course, maybe some people believe he put a little bit more money into infrastructure, but he was a very optimistic person. So he put stimulus packages to stimulate the economy to go stimulate. So that is an optimistic view of the economy. President Ruto is a little bit pessimistic about the economy. I'm sorry to say this. And I can tell you, that's why he came with austerity measures. Austerity measures don't help the economy very much. In fact, it's argued that austerity measures of the economy are actually negative to the economic prosperity of any country. So I would like to say, let him move away from austerity measures in the economy. That is the biggest mistake you can ever make. And I can tell you, for example, why do I say austerity measures are bad? When you are cutting the 300 billion from the budget, and you're trying to say that there will be no tea in offices. Can you imagine if I tell you at TV 47 there is no tea? Do you know, you start seeing there's a gleam or gloom picture of the TV station, you may start looking for a job. If where I work in Strathmore, I'm told there's no tea, there's no lunch, there's no flowers, you'll start realizing that things are suffering. And who supplies flowers? The mama mboga, isn't it? Who supplies tea? The mama mboga, the people down there. So which means you are cutting money from the people who need it the most.
Okay.
But the people who don't need it, like this foreign travel, I don't know what, those allowances, packages, those ones are people who can live without them. But you stop mama mboga from bringing tea to a government office, they go completely, a child can't go to school, they can't go to hospital. So I'm trying to say, breathe good freshness into the economy, bring optimism, remove pessimism, and then put stimulus where it's needed. At the same time, unite people. Let us not have, they did this, they did that. Let him stop talking about what took him to State House, like the nonsense we know that took him to State House. Let him focus on how can I bring Kenyans back to enjoy the economy so that everybody else has an equal opportunity. By the way, I can tell you, in Singapore, they said, let us not equalize results. Let us equalize opportunities. Results means that you are trying to look at everybody must be equal to the other. No. Let us see that every Kenyan has an opportunity in this government to be able to explore those opportunities. People invest in it as their country, people own it, and then the economy will grow.
Engineer, do you feel like 58 days so far, the new government has a fiscal discipline? You know, even as it talks about having positive vibes in matters the economy. Do you have a fiscal discipline as a country?
You know, this country has, this new administration, we can't really say they have spent so much. They've just been in government for the last probably a few days because the cabinet secretary has just got sworn in, I think 2 weeks ago. Therefore, we can't really judge them on that end. I think the only thing we can judge them is on their conduct. Have they had the decorum for running an administration? They have made mistakes here and there in making statements that are not clear and precise. So I think one of the challenges that Ruto need to address is making sure that the government is clearly communicating its agenda. We don't want ministers saying one thing and being misunderstood or saying something else. We also need to have a clear messaging platform where the government position is well communicated to the people so that we can also instill confidence. Much of the work that is going to be done to build this economy will be done by me and you, not the government. The government is going to facilitate by providing the environment that we can do the business, by providing the infrastructure, by providing the resources. But much of the work will be done by us. So therefore, we need to instill confidence by sending the right signals, by communicating the right things, by aligning ourselves with the right narrative. The time for complaining about the previous administration is over now. You have your ministers in place, you have your you have seen the bilateral partners coming every day to meet Ruto and saying we are going to work with you. You've seen how at the COP27, the whole world was just praising Ruto in terms of the message he was sending about the poor countries and how the climate change is affecting the poor nations. And therefore, we need to rally on that support and confidence that the world has over us, because we have gone through a very successful election, a peaceful process without any challenges. The judiciary has pronounced itself. Can we use that rally and support that we have so far in continuing the same momentum and making the right decision? Can we have one position being communicated clearly on the position of the government? Not these confusing narratives that are bedeviling us.
Yeah. And in fact, just to say, our president has got one strength. He's a very good communicator. That strength can be a weakness, because people who are very good in communication, when they communicate the right thing, very good. But if they communicate the opposite of the right thing, it's also glaring. Just like in the Bible, Simon Peter was very good in speaking out his mind. So there's a time when Jesus praised him and said, don't even tell anybody, you are very right, I'll make you the rock.
Right.
At the time he was told, get behind me, Satan. So the president is good, and in fact, that's why we are having something to really harvest. At the COP, he came out very, very clearly on how to articulate matters. When when he attended the UN Security meeting in New York, again, that was fantastic. He came out and pronounced it very well. What he needs to do is to sit with his government, the cabinet ministers, the cabinet secretaries, and all people in arms of government, and come with what we call a communications plan. And this communications plan will unite the message. In fact, they need to be trained on Kenya Kwanza Manifesto and the direction so that they can pronounce themselves. Like, for example, Machogu goes to Dedan Kimathi University and says something that looks like the government will draw funding from universities. Yet they signed a charter in a Catholic university to increase funding. So then you wonder which arm of government is speaking. And this is a Minister for Education, which should do better.
Well, matters the whole communication will definitely get the whole reactions a little bit later. But then let's go back to matters of economy. And Harsh, even as you chime in on what the gentlemen were talking about, which kind of expenditure should the government be focusing on cutting right now?
No, I think it's a cross-cutting, array of areas of expenditure. But basically, it should be the usual travel issues to do with the mandazis in office and what have you. I mean, I am here.
The same thing he's talking about, the tea and the,
if you listen to Ogola, you'll be lost. He is telling us to continue spending when we have a huge public debt. President Uhuru's expenditure, Uhurunomics as I call them, have not really spurred economic growth. And I don't think you want to give people a bullish, outlook just because it is good to say. That's openly lying. In fact, one of the things that we have been doing as a country is to overproject revenue. And the strategy of Kenya Kwanza, if you look at the plan, the manifesto, is to project, expenditure growth, government deficit by about 3 years, average growth, so that then you have a realistic, way of projecting how much you can collect from the people, but also reducing, expenditure. You cap it at 75%. We want to attain a 3%, budget deficit. Just like it used to be under Kibaki administration. And so that means then it has to be that you have to cut your cloth according to size. You have to live within your means. And that expenditure is really at a recurrent level. If you look at, for example, our counties, they are spending 88% of the money, the ordinary shareable revenue, equitable share as we call it, to recurrent expenditure. So only about 12% is going to development. So that, and yet the PFM law requires we do it at 70-30. 70 for recurrent, 30 for development. So if you continue doing it that way, it's not sustainable. So I disagree strongly with the thinking that the president should come on television and lie. This is an honest president. We are in a hole. What you need to do is to adjust, and then growth will come slowly but surely. You know, one of the things that you do when you are overexpending is you misallocate resources in areas that are not a priority to the country. For example, we are still reeling from the effects of, you know, unbudgeted, you know, projects. You know, huge amounts of money that was spent on projects that do not have a lot of value for Kenyans.
And that's one thing that actually President, when campaigning, he said that he will ensure that his government will not have unbudgeted projects.
Exactly. And you see now, you can't just say because the president has been sworn in, it's only 58 days, we should forget about what has happened. Mm-hmm. The effects of what happened in the last regime will be with us for a very long time. In fact, I want to reiterate here, we only have 18 months to do a good catch-up. If we don't utilize the next 18 months to do what is right, we will dig ourselves deeper. In fact, we have been going the Greece way in terms of public debt. And so therefore, what is the solution? The solution of the previous administration was to subsidize consumption. Here we are trying to ensure that we subsidize production. That is a clear shift. That's why you find, you reduce the cost of fertilizer and, of course, remove issues around the coordination failure in terms of ensuring that those who deserve it get it so that it is not also hijacked by cartels.
Right.
But also new sources of funding, what you call aid money, to focus on the development aspects of climate change, water, health, and education. A very clear plan. Mm-hmm. And then you also have infrastructure development funded by privatization of companies, government companies, so that then you get that money. And of course, PPPs, public-private partnerships. So there's a very clear plan on how to ensure the plan is funded.
Okay.
But also in terms of taxation, one of the things that we need to bring up very clearly is the fact that we want to ensure that everybody pays taxes. The common wananchi is paying taxes because they cannot evade paying taxes. They know, they will be caught up. The people who are not paying taxes are the bourgeois, the owners of capital. They are the ones who have tax consultants who know how to hide this.
How effective is the fair playground of Ruto that he wants to have taxing more on the wealth? How effective is it going to be?
Yeah, because you see, for example, capital gains is only taxed about 10% the last time I checked. So you need to put that more. And also bring it into the bracket. Let people declare exactly what they're earning. Those fake stamps, for KRA in terms of the fast-moving goods kind of things. So people are hiding a lot of money that they should have actually have been able to declare for the taxman to bring it to book. So there's a lot of that, and of course using technology rather than the power and force, so that then you become more intelligent. And I'm glad, by the way, and I must give credit. The KRA intelligence unit is very, very useful, the department there. They actually could be better than even the police, actually, in getting to know who is. So they just need to be given that capacity. Of course, they want to increase the number of staff and kind of thing, so that you are not trying to increase taxes by having new areas of taxation. Please, let me clarify that. You're not trying to say now tax, increase tax from 16 to 20. You are simply saying there are people here who are not paying tax. And it's very clear, because if you are to even take the example of M-Pesa, you have 30 million customers, only 7 million paid up, and that does not mean because you are using M-Pesa, then that money should be taxed necessarily. But at least there should be a way in which we bring more people into the formal structure of the economy.
And small matters the whole career, and a point that you raised, the whole technology. I want to bring in engineer on this.
Before you bring him, I wanted to make a last point here. If your M-Pesa, account, the what do you call it, the balance sheet there is much better to account for the money you use, even for all of us here, than your bank account. Statement, because that when you do it, sometimes people don't even know how much they earn because they don't know how much they spend. So that kind of thing. So you need to bring people back, because you can trace, you can see spending, and this big data companies, they could even be Facebook and what have you. They have more information about how we are using our monies and what have you, or our preferences and whatever. We have to take advantage of that now, rather than going, at people and because they've not paid, you take their tanks and their donkeys and their cows. So that kind of thing. We have to have a turnaround so that then we do so. But also, it's not just a question of collecting more. It's a question of also government having discipline, not to expend monies anyhowly because it is available.
Right, engineer. As the whole the KRA and the technology that he raises, saying that it's even more, it's better than the police. And this is a story that I think was run last week. KRA having the body cams for their agents. How effective do you think this is going to be, basically?
I think I hope the intelligence he's alluding to is not having DCI in KRA, because that has really worked against tax collection, the spirit of tax collection, because it has been more of predatory. Once they know what you have or the potential you have, then there is an element of harassment. But in terms of deploying technology when it comes to tax collection, I think that's something that KRA should definitely leverage on. Even the county governments have a responsibility to take advantage of technology in expanding their ability to collect. Because remember, 70% of the people today are very young people. And therefore, these are people who will do their business mainly in the digital economy as we move forward. And therefore, if we don't also embrace technology in how we do our business, whether it's tax collection or so, we will now be left out, because many people are now operating, for example, using M-Pesa payment wallets, as opposed to going to the bank to withdraw money or using cash for any transaction. Therefore, we must be able to be in that space, both as government, both as tax collectors, and any other person who wants to do business with us needs to be able to enjoy that space. Therefore, it's very important that technology becomes part and parcel of how we do business, both in government and outside.
Right, now let's cross over to, as a civil engineer, I want to get your sharp mind on this. This is a story that was, it's on page 10 of the Daily Nation. Bloated bill of quantities. A number of the items used in the construction are purchased at exorbitant prices. The bloated costs and other shady moves behind SGR deal secrecy. So the railway building firm was exempted from paying taxes in Kenya, even as it paid them in China. Still on the matters, the taxes, and as a civil engineer on this, could we as Kenya, as Kenyan civil engineers just have done this deal without having to have and outsource?
One of the things I've always said is that it's very sad that you come to Africa, you build a road that is going to be consumed by Africans, but you're using foreign currency, hard currency, to get funding for it. And in addition to that, use consultants who are foreign, who don't know the cost of doing business here, to design for you bills of quantities. We can't be able to do this project as a country. We can't be able to even decide which among these projects is important to us. The problem we have is an element of our politics confuses our desire for economic growth. Our politics is very selfish. Politicians come in place. They want to make money. They want to be rich within a very short time. Our campaigns are very expensive. If I want to be president 2027, I must craft a very expensive deal today to be able to finance my election in 2027. So as a country, we have a responsibility to start changing how we do politics. We need to be like those economists where if a politician come to you, you listen to what he's able to offer, not the money that is able to give you. But as long as we still want money from politicians, these kind of deals will always be happening, because if they come to a Kenyan engineer or Kenyan quantity surveyors, he'll be able to tell you here we are losing money. But the Chinese will tell you, okay, I have 1 bag of cement is $1, so should I write $2? You write $2. After all, it is you who's paying, it's not him. If he goes to the Middle East countries, they pay that kind of money. So he doesn't have ability to compare between Africa and, a country in Africa and the Middle East to know this is an African country that is borrowing your hard currency. And for them to pay, there are people who are going to lose. There are hospitals in the rural parts of that country that will lose in terms of medical services. There are schools that will not get quality education or facilities to provide education for their children. But if we invested in our own people, if we invested in trust with our own people, we have good institutions that can be able to run this kind of business. We have done a lot of infrastructure as a country. We cannot fail to do SGR if we are given the opportunity. Right. What we lack is our kind of politics has made doing economic governance a very murky business.
Well, Dr. I was saying you were shaking your head there. Even as you chime in on that, could we ever heal from such kind of things that we're reading from our dailies? A number of the items used in the construction or purchased at exorbitant prices. Could we ever heal from such?
Well, I mean, the thing is that the seeds of this thing was implanted during Moi. And what I mean by that is that when Moi tried to bring what is called the Dream Team, where a PS, a special PS, was being paid 2 million, another one was earning around 200,000 shillings. So then everybody said, how can we earn these 2 million? So everybody came with very many creative accountings. And now, of course, if one PS is earning 2 million and you have PSs together, when you meet for coffee, who buys coffee? The one who earns 2 million. Who is more powerful? The one who earns 2 million. So Kenyans are racing towards who will have the highest net worth. If we continue that route, we may actually have, because we have, when Moi's time, before Moi's time, people used to have scandals of hundreds of thousands. Then before Moi ended, it was some millions of shillings. Then we came with hundreds of millions of shillings. Then we went to billions of shillings. And we are still under billions of shillings. And I can tell you, if you're not careful, we shall produce a trillion of shilling of corruption. But to put this clear, let me tell you this. Kenya do not like intelligent people. Kenya don't like morally upright people. Kenyans don't like people with conscience. But all these things gravitate towards the stomach. And that's what I'm telling you, other than saw me shaking my head when I was talking, that if we can be able to sell a candidate based on their ideology, I'm telling you, if you stand in a public, I've been a politician, and tell people about, I'll build that road, Mwara is here, I'll do that, and you don't give them something for the stomach, forget about being elected. Tell them, young man, you're very promising, but come next time. That's what they'll tell you. And I'm sure that Honorable Maura can be able to, Isaac Maura can be able to confirm this. So what I'm trying to say, it is what it is. But what I'm telling you, let us look from the best. It's about leadership and governance. The problem is, once you have come to office, must you continue playing those games, or you can change? Kim Wan-yung came into office, and he completely changed the direction and said, the best bet, take our best and brightest. This is it. Every economy that has transformed because of two reasons. One, mineral or natural resources which are rich in that country. Go to UAE, you'll see it's there, isn't it? But UAE knew that they don't have the best and brightest. And that's why they are hiring people from everywhere who are foreigners to convert their natural resources into productivity. If you go to a country like Mauritius, it has no natural resources, there's nothing. But they said, let us build our people so that we can build a big service economy. So if you go to the banking sector, 80% of the balance sheet of the banking sector is meant of services. So offer tourism services, banking services, financial services. So in Kenya, if we don't go to pick our best and brightest, look at for example, the cabinet secretary team sheet for Kenya Kwanza, and tell me that's what is best and brightest. Go to the list of PSS. Tell me whether it is. I'm not saying they are not. You should tell me. Me, I don't know. But engineer knows. Let us go to every aspect.
I'm pretty sure Mheshimiwa will answer you.
Yeah, he will answer me. So let's go to every aspect where we are talking about people being deployed to work. People are struggling to prove they have a degree, while we have PhD holders got jobs. That's what I'm trying to say. If we pick best and brightest, what we call better job placement in people, leadership and governance, and I'm not speaking out of the blues. Let me just give an example. We talked about the issue of privatization, isn't it? Safaricom was sitting inside Telcom. It was one of the most corrupt government parastatal. If you wanted to connect a line for yourself, you needed to pay and bribe somebody to connect for your line at home. That's a fact, engineer, you know that, isn't it? When Michael Joseph came, he used the same corrupt people to build one of the best East Africa's company. The same people. So you can't tell me Kenyans are all thieves. No. We don't lack intelligent people. Moral upright people are very many. But the stomach has converted everything the other way. And when I finish, what we lack in this economy, we lack what is called big impact, big program, and big money. We are thinking small. Even you talk about SGR, you talk about expressway, those are small thinking. China has come up with the Road and Belt Initiative to ensure that it can take advantage of over 100 countries' connectivity so that they can import what they want from many countries like DRC, Congo, Kenya into China and use their natural resources to produce what they can export using the same infrastructure. So the SGR we are doing between Mombasa to Malaba is to help China transport their commodities from China into the port of Mombasa, then take them to Uganda. Is it for us? How can we build a bypass for people to go and eat nyama choma? Kenya should say, now that president, we have a very good articulate president. We have Eastern Africa where we are commanding as an economy. Can we come up with an overarching, a big impact, big project, big money, big idea project, whereby we can ensure that our mama mboga becomes SMEs, not mama mboga? Where we can create an ecosystem and economy, given the fact that Kenya has the highest literacy rate in Eastern Africa, we can leverage on the human capital we have. So instead of me fighting with engineer over a small cake of 50 million population, we are fighting over a cake of a 400 million population that can come from this region. So what I want is, let us not think small. In fact, the last thing I'm trying to say here, let us forget about these things of SGR was overvalued. This is bullshit for me. Let us focus on what is good, isn't it? SGR is in our balance sheet. Telling us how deals were done bad won't help us. What we need to do is, how do we go from here? What is our next big idea? These small things, who stole this, who stole that, let us forget about it. Blaming these people should not help. Let's focus on. Now, we have a Kenya Kwanza government, which is a Kenyan government, not a Kenya Kwanza government anymore. Let us rally behind the president. Let us all work towards his success, because you know what, my brother? If he fails, all of us have failed. He must succeed. And let us not also just say it on TV that he's succeeding for the sake of brainwashing him. Let him succeed, real success. And Maora can answer him by saying, I didn't mean he comes to lie. Everyone must come and give hope, and they need to tell us how the picture ahead looks like, so that when we are making sacrifices today, we are making what's called, which kind of sacrifice we are making to get what tomorrow. We call it focused poverty. My father did not enjoy the luxury of cows he had. He sold the cows, and we lived a difficult life to finance my education, and he told me, one day you'll be a professor. And that made my family make the sacrifices they needed. So what are we sacrificing for now that Kenya Kwanza need to tell us? That's optimism. It's not optimism for the sake of just lying. It's truthful optimism. Thank you.
Mheshimiwa, he speaks about right now these peculiar documents are not important. Do you feel like the financial agreements, CS, Kipchumba Murkomen promised that he'll provide all the arrangements. We haven't yet seen all of them. But then do you feel like all these years later, do we even need these documents?
Yes, I think it's important to do disclosure because then it helps us to know how to proceed going forward, because this was a huge investment. You know, this project cost about 443 billion by the time it was done. That's a lot of money. I don't think we have had any kind of investment, a single most investment like that in our time. And I was very privileged to be in the inaugural Madaraka Express with the President Uhuru way back in 2017, and also later on we used the same with the Chinese ambassador, I think in 2019 or so, where they were actually trying to help tell us what we call own the railway with the Chinese government, so that they can go all the way to Kisumu, because they could see our balance sheet could not allow us to borrow more from them. But they were very proud of the fact that they themselves, they had broken even, that the amount of goods that had traveled via SGR was about 400 billion by that time. And that was quite telling, because you see now we've been left with an SGR that is not transporting our own goods. And I remember being at the Chinese Academy of Governance and asking them, because at that point the Americans really wanted to build for us a motorway from Mombasa to Nairobi. And then the question I asked them is, okay, what do you think about this? It doesn't matter who builds a motorway as long as the goods are on transit are ours. So they have a very clear strategy to conquer the regions. And of course the SGR is part of the Belt and Silk Road initiative. And of course you can also even say Thika Road now that it has gone all the way to Marwa. What we are doing as Kenya Kwanza though is to go to the other side, because you have by 2020, if I recollect very well, we had 199,000 containers moving into the hinterland, but then they were coming, only 10,000 were going back with goods. So you can imagine. So a lot of this is actually imported. So what do? You have then to ensure that these containers are not going back empty, and also they are not going with raw materials, because then that also does not make sense. So the issue of value proposition, and I'm sure that is what the president would want to see with our embassies, the 66 embassies across the world, where you actually get new markets, but you don't do supply chain, where you just want to say, I'm building this little vehicle and this is a cost. Is there demand? The demand and supply. So you actually get the market first, so that then you now come in and do the rest. Value addition is critical. It's easier said than done, but I believe that if you look at the 1970s, manufacturing was actually 20% of our GDP. It's actually gone down, I think, to about 7%, if I'm not wrong. It can be confirmed. So that is what we are looking at, trying to increase production and productivity, total factor productivity, in terms of, Kenyans are very enterprising and industrious people, and giving them incentives, around how to actually see that they can actually make more money from working than actually waiting for political handouts. Because you see, the problem of political handouts is what I call poverty-producing politics. It's very easy. You don't need to sell any ideology. You don't need even to sell your agenda. You just need people to queue. And it's become a culture, unfortunately. I am a practicing politician. It's become a culture, and people expect that. So I remember, when I was coordinating the Kiambu Presidential Secretariat, people would wait for hours just to receive 200 shillings from people. And then you wonder, really, is this not dehumanizing? But then when you look at the level of poverty amongst them, you cannot blame them, because they basically are in a lottery. Today they get, tomorrow they don't get. And that is what many people live, even hand-to-mouth kind of thing.
At the end of the day, you give them the money?
No, I'm talking about people waiting for money. It's not Isaac Mwaura giving money.
No, okay, not you personally, but then...
You have to.
Did they get the money?
No. Just get me clearly. That has become a culture, and we have to face it head on. We have to agree that people have been conditioned that if they do not get money from a politician, that is actually, that person is not as good enough to be a leader. However, it's also really a question of economy, to be honest. How much does somebody make, even if they are to be a mama mboga? And our strategy clearly demonstrates that if you are able to increase an annual income of just about 300 shillings, from 200 to 500, you are potentially able to increase the size of the economy by about 5 trillion Kenya shillings. And that's a lot of money, because currently our economy has been expanded, I dispute that, to a nominal GDP of about 12.7 trillion. For me, I think it's less than 10, the real GDP. But 11.07. I have my own calculations. And I think we should not also continue to say that we have an advantage over countries like Tanzania. Because Tanzania is coming up very fast. In fact, the difference between us and them is very minimal. And when you look at it, it is because of the discipline. Of course, the long-term stability of having CCM in power means also, just like the Japanese principle of Kaizen, they have also continuously improved upon themselves over time. And there's also a lot of predictability. And that is a dividend that this last election has given to Kenya.
Okay.
But by the end of the day, we must also not have an illusion that these are simplistic solutions. They've got to be thought out very well. There's a question of coordination kind of thing.
Okay.
And there are also new areas of growth. What is a new area of growth? clean energy. You see, for production. Kenya has got a capacity of having about at least 10 gigawatts from geothermal, another one 20 from wind power and such kind of things. These are the kind of areas we need to look at. There's a huge waterfall in Kitui. Kitui is the size of central Kenya. What can we do with that? What can we do with solar power? Germany is producing 2% of its national grid from solar, yet they don't have sunshine as much as we do.
Okay.
So we have also to now start thinking forward, because Africa, if, for example, right now we are contributing only 3% of the climate, whatever. So if we are to move forward and produce for the world, which I think it should be, because Africa should be the continent of the 22nd century, in my humble submission, those are the areas we need to look at and say, what can we do for the world? And we have a good opportunity, because now East Africa community is 7 countries. DR Congo, about 170 million people. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area, I like calling it a COFTA for ease of pronunciation, 1 billion people potential. So those kind of intra-African partnerships. But we have to have some that we are producing. Today every road has got a Toyota vehicle. Then you can see revenue going to Japan.
Right.
Most of the vehicles we drive are Mitumbas, because we can't afford new ones. What is that we are giving to the world? Are we exporting all our tea? Are we? Okay. So it's not a very easy conversation where you just want to apportion blame. I think what a new administration does is to give the country a new opportunity to start it all over again, or to continue with that which was working, to review, to introspect, for the benefit of the common good for all. And
in that whole spirit of what we give to the whole world engineer, we will have a whole opportunity to extend the SGR all the way to Kisumu. This will definitely open the borders and all that. As a civil engineer, what kind of lessons now, from reading from all this, the whole SGR secrecy and everything that was done, what should we do differently now for the whole SGR all the way to Kisumu?
Number one, I think we need to really invest in values as a country. The element of corruption, trying to inflate bills, is really going to cost us if we continue with it. Our appetite for selfish interests really has to cut down, because in terms of the knowledge, the expertise, the know-how, we have it all. The challenge we have is that how do we apply all that we have in terms of our advantage as a country into a real economic gain? Today, Safaricom is a big investor in Ethiopia from something that has been bred in this country. If you go to Tanzania and Uganda and even South Sudan, a lot of the businesses doing business there are Kenyan-grown businesses. Today, Equity, as a bank, 30% of its revenue is coming from DRC Congo, meaning we can have homegrown businesses, homegrown enterprises that can be able to, we can be able to leverage and take over the region. But the biggest challenge we have is that we have a trust issue. Nakumat went to Uganda and Rwanda, Tuskys went to those countries and they collapsed. So people still have a challenge of trusting Kenya as an economy. Tanzania has the advantage of being predictable. They are honest people. They are people who can be trusted. Even if they have their challenges, they are now trying to address those challenges of maybe people not being able to be at par in terms of the work ethics as Kenyans. So can we borrow from our neighbors and see what is good for them and bring on board into the country? Can we clean up our politics? Can we clean up our institutions so that we can be able to be a country that can be trusted with big ticket projects, not just locally, but even in the region? If you go to DRC Congo, where we are sending over 900 soldiers, if we make that country peaceful, the opportunities for Kenyans, whether it's in the medical field, whether it's farmers, engineers, is very huge. And we cannot allow to be the country that brings peace to DRC, but we are not part of the people building that country. If you go to South Sudan, the potential for doing business with our engineers, with our nurses, with our teachers is very huge. If you go to Rwanda, a lot of the things that are being done there in their education system is because of Kenyans who went there and helped to establish. In Botswana, in Namibia, it's Kenyans who went there And even up to today, they still rely on us in terms of providing education and all that. So therefore, we have an opportunity to not just take over the region, but the country, but the whole continent. What we need to invest is that, can we clean up our politics? Can we clean our ethics as a country? Can we instill values so that when we stand out, we can be trusted?
All right, Doctor, even as you come in on this, definitely when the CS released this particular agreements, it had a whole pinch with the relationship between Kenya and China. What does this mean economically for in future, even the whole relationships between China, Kenya, and even maybe other countries?
First of all, that's why I told you it is not good for us to talk about it, but they say that if you don't think about the past, you can make the same mistake in future, but I think it's poorly applied here. Any agreement has confidentiality. So this agreement done between China and Kenya had confidentiality clause. By breaking that clause, you reduce trust, and when there's less trust, people become more transactional. I'm sure you know this. So when there's less trust, China will look at us more now carefully, and that will reduce the trust that China and Kenya has enjoyed. So I was thinking the best thing is that by revealing it does not help anybody who has lost money, but sours a goodwill that could have continued working. So that's what I can make about that statement. The second thing I can make here is that we are working too hard, we need to work smart. What do I mean by that? All these things we are talking about, building infrastructure to make the economy grow, there's a good thing to separate between what is called superstructure and infrastructure. What's the superstructure? The superstructure is what he's talking about. What do you want to achieve? Thika Road was built to reduce travel time between 2 hours from Thika to 45 minutes from Thika. We built the Naivasha-Nairobi road so that we can go there in 55 minutes. But we are still doing 2 hours because we put too many bumps. Why are we putting too many bumps? Because we are reckless. If everybody knows that this is town, let us slow down. We don't put those big barrier bumps where people hit and their cars collapse and get accidents. We'll just put something called speed bumps to show you, slow down. We don't have to put a barrier on the road. So before we blame the politicians, I'll tell Kenyans, first of all, we cannot remain Kenyans and we want our leaders to change, because as Maura says, they are still waiting for something and has become a culture. We cannot change that. That's about the national ethos, national values being changed. So superstructure is, what do you want to have? For example, engineer, if you are building a house for your, let's say talk about holiday home, where you want to retire, as you do farming, or as you do fishing, you will build this house differently to deliver what you wanted to achieve. So what is the superstructure for Kenya? What are we thinking about? Are we thinking, like he said, the entire 400 population in Eastern Africa, that we are looking at our capabilities, how we can take advantage, or we are just building infrastructure for the sake of it? So superstructure should define the infrastructure. What we want to do with the infrastructure should define which kind of infrastructure we build. And you may find that some infrastructure we build are not our superstructure. Did we build SGR to carry Chinese goods from Mombasa to Malava, or we build SGR to open the economic zones in Kenya? Did we build the LAPSSET corridor to open up that area for us to export what we want to export or import what we need to import? Or are we building because, and actually I can tell you why I'm crying here. Do you know why, as we continue talking about investing in Mama Mboga, no one will do it? Because no politician makes money from doing that. But by doing big infrastructure projects, there's money to be eaten. Let's go to water infrastructure now. The last mile to make you open a tap and tap water, no one is investing. But the infrastructure generate water like a dam is being done. Then the dam is being done. Then the dam is done. But what do you want? You want water. GDC with geothermal potential we are talking about. Do you know how many wells have been dug? I did a strategic plan for GDC. So many wells have been dug. But what we are talking about that, what do we want? Do you want electricity? The KPI for GDC is megawatts in the grid, not the megawatts potential in the dam. So because the megawatts in the grid needs transmission line, you talk about the issue of Turkana wind power. to invest on the wind power generation, people will eat money, like 10% and millions or billions of shillings. But now to do the transmission so that you can get energy, little will be eaten. So people put less money in that one because they don't make money. So in as much as we are telling the citizens to change, also up here we need to change. I don't know who will make us change. But let me tell you what, as we look at it, somehow these things will catch up with everybody. China, remember, had so many problems with ethical issues and meritocracy. But when Chinese lost a war which they could have won, just because of appointing friends and colleagues and cronies, they learned what is called meritocracy. Is that what I told you? The CV of a minister for transport in China is maybe six undergraduate degrees, 3 masters, 2 PhDs, they are an economist, anthropologist, they are a psychologist, they have all these together. So if you look at the CV of a Kenyan transport minister, and you compare with the CV of the transport minister for China, and they are sitting on the table to negotiate.
We'll definitely have to look for
you get what your CV looks like.
We'll definitely have to look for both of them and compare. For factual of it. But then speaking of matters change, Heshimiwa, 4 days from now, on the 14th, that is going to be on Monday, April is going to release new fuel prices. And the last month, so it dropped by 1 shilling. So basically, 178, 30 cents and 163 respectively in Nairobi. So basically it was a whole mega relief. What do you anticipate this time around? And how is this going to, because Kenyans always wait for the 14th, and at the eve of that particular night, many of them even rush to the fuel petrol stations just in case. What do you anticipate this time around?
Just before I answer you that, Fred Ogola here is advancing academic arguments that for you to be effective, you should have X number of degrees. I don't agree with him because Bob Collymore never even had a university degree, for him to run that telco. So I don't think so. Maybe he can argue about relevant experience in terms of running a ministry docket. That I can agree.
And definitely, it was one thing that was raised during the whole vetting.
Yes. And you can tell some people, also speaking very good English does not make you more competent. It doesn't. So we have to be very careful not to bludgeon, people, and even some of the people who have the best of CVs do not necessarily deliver. I have a lot of respect for people who have gone through a political experience or encounter, because they get to know how to relate with the people. When you are too technical, then you sometimes are removed from the people. And that's a question that has been answered very greatly in matters public policy. When I was studying at the University of Leeds in England in public policy, we were asking ourselves, do you need the list of 100 professors, or do you need a list of 100 people in the local register to lead you? And the answer is always the second, because then you are eclectic. You are multidisciplinary, you have different worldviews. And that is actually, and doxology, for that matter. That's what makes you then to really govern the people, because it's not one-sided. If then we just, for example, depend on economics per se, it's only one view. You need others as well. You need the journalists, you need, that kind of thing. But let me come to the issue of pricing. It's a cartel.
But I think...
Just a minute. No.
Let him finish.
Let me finish my argument so that
let him finish.
Fred, we are no longer in the political scenario. We now must be gentlemen and argue as professionals. I allow you to...
Allow rebuttals.
That's okay. But, I allow you to finish, then you speak. So that we don't also make this show acrimonious, because that's for first-time legislators. The issue of fuel. I did a question in the 11th Parliament. I still remember, because I was asked as a Kenyan that there was increase in fuel prices. So Charles Keter came there together with, I think he's called Nganga. He was, it used to be called ERC, Energy Regulation Commission. No, it's EPRA. And I was given a 12-page answer document. Did it reduce the oil prices, the fuel prices? No, it didn't. They keep on saying, we import this bulk for 2 months. And only when we have, so if we have to finish this consignment before, but I have seen inconsistencies in that narrative. So I think generally we don't expect much, because you will hear people blaming the Ukraine war and the ripple effect. The OPEC countries met and they had agreed to reduce production, for example, so that they then increase the prices. You remember around 2012, 2013, there was actually a reduction in oil prices, crude oil, Brent crude oil prices, because of a new technology called fracking, that they were using sand to actually get a lot of oil out there. So there are many factors in that regard. However, futuristically, because this is just hypothetical, I really wish we had succeeded in having our oil in Turkana. And it should be, because even I remember in the last administration, there was early oil that was actually transported, by road, because we don't have a pipeline as yet, to Mombasa. Why? Because the potential that Talo had told us is that could actually take care of all our local consumption. So you can imagine, in terms of balance of payment issues, we will not then be using, foreign denominated currencies to actually, import fuel. I hope you're getting what I'm trying to say. So right now we are still very much exposed to external shocks. We still have to rely on imports. And that means even right now, if you look at our shilling, it's exchanging at 125 or something like that. So that in itself has had an effect, because for a long time the dollar was 100 shillings. Yet it's not the real value, because of the fact that there's that distortion. You can even see how the central bank governor confessed that there were people who were trying to do some kind of a golden bag thing in terms of currency manipulation and exchange and what have you. So there is more to it than just the price you find, at the fuel pump. Of course, I agree with many Kenyans that I think we have overtaxed fuel, the fuel levy and all of those kind of things. It translates into the money that goes to Kenya Roads Board to make, our roads and what have you, that is distributed to the other roads agencies. But if they need to do some tax reform that would enable us to lower the cost of living, I think that is commendable. However, remember the solution that was there earlier on was fuel subsidy. But if you go to Europe, a liter is going for about almost 3 euros. So it's even actually higher than what we are getting currently here. It's actually higher. So you have to also look at it comparatively. Are we paying for fuel in the same manner as others are paying for? So that then you leverage your expectations. Rather than my brother, you subsidize fuel at 16 billion per month, then it is misused, and you see, without mentioning names, so many new petrol stations opening up because that is the money that is being used. For 4 months, you spend 60 billion. It's unacceptable. It is taking away all our development budget.
Right. Dr. I'll definitely give you the time to rebut on what
mine was just
Washim was saying.
Clarify that I didn't mean that you must have a long CV. But what I mean is, if you talk about technical, you cannot make someone who is non-technical negotiate a technical deal. And I'm talking about evidence, because he can throw words, but in God we trust, the rest bring evidence. If a technician like engineer was to negotiate the Nairobi Expressway deal with the Chinese, they could have known that once you construct the expressway up there, you'll destroy the lower, and therefore you have to tell the Chinese that leave it the way you found it. That is costing us 10 billion shillings. So with all the correct matrices of choosing anybody because they are good with society, we are paying 10 billion. So that I'm trying to say, let us balance these things. And that's why when I saw the CS picked, I didn't criticize too much. I waited to see who are the, when I saw the cabinet secretaries picked, I didn't have a lot of criticism. But when I asked now, what are the peers? Because now the peers will give you the technical aspect. Now again, look at that list, you'll discover that that is not really consumable. So what we are trying to ask, if he says that education is useless, isn't it? And we should pick the person who works in the registry to lead. What are you telling young people there who are selling their land, selling their cattle to go to university, who are spending a lot of time? No, there must be implications to every policy we make. We can just not be populism here. If you tell us, why are we educating lecturers? Why are we educating technocrats if they are not important? Why don't we make them become good politicians then? I've also been in politics. I was running for member of parliament of Ugenya. I know how it works, but when we are talking to people on the ground, you be a politician, but when you're going to do work, be the technocrat. I can't go to class and tell people.
Basically, you should balance both
You
of
must
them.
balance both of them, and that's what I'm trying to say. Then, of course, now I have to reveal here that I have actually sponsoring amendment to the Constitution using a popular initiative. The bill is out. You'll see the bill circulating now already. We already done what's called the first public hearing in University of Nairobi. Today we are doing one in Multimedia University. It is not political. It is just looking at what are the gaps that can bring, for example, the issue of national values proposed there. Look at how to address the issues of contested elections, looking at the issue of the youth, like we have going to have a youth commission. So I'm trying to say, let us just see the role we can play, because I've seen the politics side. I'm also a technocrat. So I know the technocratical part of it. You don't have to miss both. In fact, one thing that worked for Kibaki, he chose very powerful political people to head the ministries, but chose very good technocrats to become peers.
Real quick,
that balance helps.
Before you cross to engineer, if the president was to call you and tell you, so Dr. if was to give you a cabinet docket, which one would you opt for as a technocrat and as a politician?
Me, I wouldn't like to become a CS, but I would like to become a technocrat, for example, PS.
Which
because
docket?
I think somewhere in the economics, because that's what I breathe and eat. By the way, let me tell you here, and I'm sorry to tell Maura, I am credited with the World Bank that I helped turn around the Greece economy when I was doing my PhD in Europe. I was sponsored by EU. So they sent me there to come with a policy on how to change Greece economy. So I have done it. I went to India. In fact, Rakaka Po can confirm, was working with me at Reserve Bank of India to write a roadmap to financial inclusion in India. And I'm saying what I've done now. The Economic Council for His Excellency President has David Ndii, isn't it? David Ndii is not a hard-nosed economist because he has been an economic activist, meaning when he left his Rhodes School in Oxford, he was only able to advise Jaramogi against the sitting president. He also advised Raila against Moi and against Uhuru. Then he advised Ruto against Uhuru. He's never advised government in power. I have done that. I know how it works. So I'm saying, let us just give credit where credit is. Let's take our best and brightest and place them in the right place, not misplace them. That's my point.
Hopefully, the communications team is.
I'm not sure he can invite me, but I'm saying I would take that. But I'm sure I can't be invited to the Kenya Kwanza government.
Engineer, some few days till the launch of the Hustler Fund, basically, and definitely Kenyans, they were told that there's going to be some conditions for all this. What should Kenyans be preparing for? Because it's a few days right now for all that and the whole. Launch of it, so that they can benefit. What should Kenyans be preparing right now for all that?
I think one of the things that Kenyans need to prepare themselves is how are they to organize themselves to take full advantage of the Hustler Fund. So in terms of organization, is it SACCOs? Is it your small business as your sole proprietor? What are you also going to do with these monies? What are the opportunities that you're going to take advantage of? So let us not just sit there, wait for Mheshimiwa and the others to go and cut the ribbon and then assume money will start flowing into our wallets. No, we need to prepare ourselves in knowing, yes, I want to borrow this money to do 1 and 2, 3 things, and that I want to do must be able to be something that make a return, and I should be able to pay. The element of free money, I want to agree with the president. We cannot afford to give Kenyans free money. People should be able to pay. Even us, when we go to IMF and the other lenders, we borrow at an interest which we pay. So everybody should take responsibility for whatever they will be able to receive from the Hustler Fund. But importantly, can we put it into meaningful use? So this is an opportunity for Kenyans or themselves to demonstrate that if this economy will turn around, everybody will put work into their own effort so that we can be able to make the deliberate investment as a country in turning around the economy. We cannot afford to just expect government to give us free handouts. It is not going to happen. It's our responsibility to make sure that we get these funds, we use it the right way, and we make sure that we are able to pay it back. Importantly also is that let it not suffer the same challenges the youth fund and the women fund suffered, or ways of fund. Can it be money that if I want to borrow this money, within a few days I can be able to access it. Within a few days I can be able to pay it, and it can reflect into my account that I've made the repayment. If there's any tax contribution that will come from my payment, can it be reflective from KRA? So that we can now see the things that Ruto and D were telling us, that if we put 50 billion in the economy, we will have 2 additional million taxpayers, and this is their contribution to the economy. Right. Then we can be able to see the benefits of the Hustler Fund.
Right, let's take a short break, and we'll definitely be right back. But I want your Hashimo's your take on all this, the Hustler Fund and how it's going to be launched, and all that, what to actually expect, and all that, before we actually get your last remarks. You're watching Morning Cafe. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Well, do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga,
and music bands every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga,
and music bands every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga,
and music bands every Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. How well do you know what's happening around you? Morning Cafe with heated political debates. Baraza la siasa.
Hiyo kitu azungumzie, angalie hali ya maisha ya watu.
Informative health discussions. Business, farming. Tasty Wednesday, Fitness Thursday, and Feel Good Friday with amazing DJs, celebs,
waimbaji, kuna comedians, alafu kuna wajinga,
and music bands.
Result of that.
Every
so
Monday to Friday from 6 a.m. to 9
is something that needs to be done now. That seems to be the Westminster consensus. So that ministers were coming from Parliament and they were parliamentarians, but technocrats were basically, people in the ministries. The constitution has shifted because we went the Washington consensus way, where now you have ministers who do not come from Parliament. So what did the first administration do under this new constitution? They took technocrats. Has it worked? I don't think so, because the technocrats lack the local touch. So President Ruto, he has actually reinstated that ministers are largely people who ran for office, who had even won, now we have to have by-elections. Mm-hmm. So you need those kind of people. And then the technocrats, of course, you can see some of the former PSS are there. and all of those kind of things. So I think it's really a matter of time. You cannot criticize people before they have performed, because, for example, the PSAs are yet to be put in place, and it's very wrong for Gola here to come and brandish his CV, and of course disparage David D. Because honestly, David D. give credit where it's due. He's the one who has, came up with the bottom-up economic model, and it has helped win William Ruto the presidency. I don't know whether Fred has actually helped anyone to win an election. He tried once and he did not succeed himself. And it doesn't mean that he's any less of an economist. It just means that David D has his place. Let us try to experiment. He's now the chairman of the Economic Council at State House, and see whether we will be able to achieve, because we've been doing things the same way. Otherwise we will live in oppositions with Jaramogi and Raila, for that matter. And that means also William Ruto is a very good student, and David must be given that credit. But let's now come to the issue of, and by the way, you need to be street smart and book smart. Mm-hmm. What helped Kibaki become what he became, the best president that we always quote, is because Kibaki was not too much of a politician. He was a technocrat. He was an economist. He studied at Makerere, was a lecturer there, went to in London School of Economics. Like, you can see the CV is there. But also, you don't need also somebody with 7 degrees, to lead the country. I don't think so. And William Ruto, in my humble submission, is an agronomist by training. He's a real minister for agriculture. I beg to opine. He's very clear on what needs to be done in economics. He's becoming a clear champion of climate change and going forward. But now, coming to the Hustler Fund, we cannot keep on reinventing the wheel, my brother, because we have had the Weather Fund. Has it worked? We have had Youth Fund. We've had Women Fund, and many other funds that have been done. The collective amount of money given to that fund, all those funds together, is about 12 billion. So in a way, it's limited resources.
Can we just have one consolidated fund? This is one question that I've always asked pundits and politicians over time. Because of time, again, so that I can have closing remarks so that I can finish. Can we just have one consolidated fund and for accountability purposes?
This is my humble submission. It's my personal opinion. It's not the position of Kenya Kwanza. Yes. So that then you learn now lessons from what never worked for these other ones.
Okay.
And so that you do not have duplication of resources and time and effort.
Okay.
But then also, I personally think it's good to give individual grants or these monies to individuals. This idea of groups, I wonder whether it really works. Because people come in, they sign documents, they fill in, they share the money and disappear. But if it is you being given money, or me, Isaac Mwaura, I know the business I want to do and how I'm supposed to do it. And of course, there must be some kind of social capital collateral of sorts. And of course, it has to have some interest, not necessarily to pay back, but also to cater for the cost of inflation and attrition. And
because of time, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have time to discuss all this. I wanted to know the whole thinking about having groups and corporates coming together so that they can have these funds. But then because of time, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have time to discuss all that. But then closing remarks, gentlemen, on matters the Hustler Fund and basically our country's economy. Dr.
Yeah, my contribution there is that, first of all, let us understand the philosophy of the president coming up with the Hustler Fund. Because in the past, we have always done what is called mob justice or injustice to some of the policies of ex-president. For example, when President Uhuru Kenyatta came out with the issue of digitizing education, and he said, I'm going to have a laptop to every school child. People said that cannot work and the rest. But then later, when COVID hit, we understood that what he meant, we need to digitize our education. Mm-hmm. And look at how digitization took place, not because of the president's statement, but that was prophetic. COVID came to teach us a lesson that we need to digitize our education. Now, when the president comes and says we need a Hustler Fund, I think the spirit there is that we have had very few Kenyans controlling the national revenue. For example, in Kenya, 1% of Kenyan entrepreneurs control 99% of the Kenyan national revenue. In the US, we have 14% of American entrepreneurs controlling 87% of the American gross revenue. So if we're able to see that that's what his spirit is, to bring in more people into this ecosystem so that we can have maybe 10%, 20% of Kenyans controlling maybe 98%, or if you like, controlling, for example, 50% of the Kenyan GDP. Maybe that could be what he's trying to say. So how do we do that? And let me just explain how the structure of government works.
Very brief.
When a president makes an executive statement like that, the minister under that, for example, could be Minister of Industrialization, Minister for Treasury, has to come with a ministerial policy. How can you execute the presidential executive order? After the ministerial policy has been written, there must be a State Department, for example, under PS, who comes up with an execution framework. How will you execute the Hustler Fund? That could be under Treasury, it could be under Industrialization, Youth Affairs, whatever that is, or public service. Then after that, there will be an agency. This could be, for example, Youth Fund. Now those funds we are talking about, they'll now come with a mechanism to execute that execution framework. So this statement by the president, what we need to read is how does it trickle down and works. So that's how I'm trying to say. And lastly, what I want to say here is...
In a second.
Yeah, I'm finishing. What we need to do is let us look at things positive first before negative.
Basically positive vibes and all that. Engineer, in like 2 seconds, kindly, because we're really out of time.
Well, just to wish the Ruto administration the very best of luck. They have no option but to succeed. They have set a very big agenda for themselves. So I would just want to reiterate, can we have the right people doing the right job? Whether they are qualified or not, is not the issue. Suitability is of more importance. Are they in touch with the work that they are supposed to do? Are they able to deliver on the promises that the administration have made? Because we are in a very difficult economic situation. We need to get out of it.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Engineer Crispus Thimba, an economic analyst, and obviously Dr. Professor Frederick Ogola, an economic expert and also a lecturer, and Honorable Isaac Mwaura, former nominated senator. Thank you, gentlemen, for making your time. Much appreciated. Thank you also, dear viewer, for being around with